Under the utilities category, we have wholesale energy, electric utility, water utility, recycled water utility, natural gas utility, CNG fuel, diesel fuel, phone lines, and wireless communication. And then we have the claims expense and claims settlement, and to round out that category, depreciation and amortization. The last two categories are operating and maintenance projects and capital improvement projects. This is taking a look at operating expenditures for all of the different funds. At the moment, it is proposed to be $366.1 million for fiscal year 2024. Overall, it's an increase of 7.4% compared to the 2023 budget when we adopted it last June. We will talk through the details of the increase as we go through the presentation. As a reminder, this is operating expenses only and does not include capital improvement projects, transfers out, or any of the service change requests that I will be presenting later this afternoon. The numbers are subject to change through finalization of the budget process. Correct. Now we will dive into the special revenue funds. Special revenue funds are specific revenue sources that are restricted or committed to specific purposes. This is where you will find all of the road-related funds, the special taxing district funds, refuse and recycling, developer impact funds, trip reduction, asset forfeiture, and then other grants is in this category as well. The road-related special taxing districts and refuse and recycling all equal 91.8% of that special revenue funds operating budget. The first special revenue fund we are looking at is the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Account, often referred to as the RMRA. Taking a look at the revenue and expenditures here, keep in mind we're only looking at the operating budget, so the differences you see between the revenue and the operating budget don't account for the CIP. That's where the CIP will fill that gap. So in this case, the revenue is estimated as $3.9 million and the expenses are estimated at $100,000. That gap will then be filled in by the CIP projects. This is gas tax. You will see the $4.6 million revenue estimate and then the 2.2 operating budget and $2.0 million for O&M projects. The O&M projects are now being pulled out of CIP. So these are non-CIP CIPs, if you will, and so they won't be tracked with CIP anymore based on the new criteria that we have come up with. So they're not going away, but we had to account for them in a different way. So that is how you will see them now. They will be broken out into those O&M projects.
What does the O&M stand for?
Operations and maintenance.
Thank you.
Wow, I couldn't even get that out fast enough.
And then I just had really one quick question, and I actually think that Wes might be the person to answer this because it comes from RCTC. But the RMRA funds that are dispersed to the city, how are those collected? Is that just a portion of the of a tax from gas purchases, or where's that money coming from?
Gas tax is gas tax. Measure A is the sales tax. The RMRA funds are from license, all the other stuff.
Like the registration fees?
It actually does.
The RMRA stems from SB1. It's actually the 12.5 cent sales tax that is on top of the gas tax. There's a traditional gas tax that we had before. The RMRA is a portion of SB1.
So is it collected from the pump?
Yes, 12.5 cents
Fantastic. Thanks.
per gallon.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then on those O&M projects, you should have a separate list in your books that lists those out for you guys. Measure A is similar to the RMRA fund. This is the 0.5% sales tax in Riverside County and can be used for capital improvements related to roads. The graph shows the estimated revenue at $5.9 million and the operating budget estimated at $159,362, and then those O&M projects at $100,000. Again, that $5.6 million difference is where the CIP will come into play. Taking a look at the special taxing districts, this is an aggregate total of all of the CFDs and LMDs. The revenue is estimated at $9.7 million, and the operating budget is at $8.5 million. Refuse and recycling is primarily a pass-through for the services with waste management. When expenditures are higher than revenues, a transfer from the general fund is initiated, and that support is because the general fund receives 100% of the franchise fees. The difference is primarily from staffing added to support that function. Next, I will pass it on to Kim for the proprietary funds of enterprise funds.
Okay, so taking a look at the enterprise funds, we're going to look at water, reclaimed water, sewer, electric, airport, and transit services. So taking a look at the water utility, the operating budget for this next fiscal year is about 82.3% in services and supplies, 15% in personnel services, and about 2.6% for operating and maintenance projects. This information represents an increase of about $3.7 million or 6.8% when compared to the current fiscal year's budget. Majority of the difference is due to increases in water purchases, both raw and treated, and electric utility costs. The O&M projects for fiscal year '24 that are included, some examples include $828,000 for water line infrastructure and $180,000 for the water tank mixer. And there should be a list of all the O&M projects at the back of this section in your notebooks. As a reminder, the spike you'll see in revenue for fiscal year '23 is a one-time settlement of $19 million. For the sewer utility, the operating budget is about 72% in services and supplies, 22.6% in personnel, and 4.7% in O&M projects. This is a decrease of about 4% or $1.3 million when compared to the current fiscal year's budget. A significant decrease is $2.2 million for the RCRA contributions and about $600,000 for maintenance and repairs. We do have some increases in personnel costs and then some O&M projects totaling $1.5 million. And some examples in this category include $692,000 for the sewer line infrastructure and $300,000 for the SCADA panel replacement. Taking a look at the electric utility, about 94% of this fund's budget is in services and supplies, and about we have an increase in wholesale energy costs, but then there's a decrease in administrative service charges and construction materials, balancing that out. There is an O&M project of about $150,000 for a capacitor bank upgrade. Then taking a look at the airport, this one is primarily made up of services and supplies, about 71.5%, and 28.5% is in personnel services. This is an increase of 6.8% or a little over $19,000 when compared to the current fiscal year. And those increases that we're seeing in this particular fund are related to the mowing and landscape contracts and tree maintenance. And then taking a look at the transit services, the operating budget, about 94 or 95% is in services and supplies, largely made up of contractual services for our bus routes. And 5.4% of this budget is in personnel services. This is an increase of 1.6% or about $55,000 when compared to the current fiscal year. There is an increase of about $230,000 in contractual services for the operations of the transit program, and then a decrease of $50,000 for one-time vehicle purchase and in the current fiscal year, and $142,000 in personnel services just due to some staffing reallocations. And then I'm going to turn it over to Julie for internal service funds.
So the internal service funds are made up of warehouse services, information technology, fleet operations, workers' compensation, and liability risk retention. Warehouse services has estimates of $528,693 in revenue and $258,194 in the operating budget. 72% of the operating budget is for personnel services, and 28% is for service and supplies. Overall, there's a decrease of 18.8% or $58,000 as compared to the current fiscal year. The decrease is in contractual service costs for software because those costs are now going to be reported under Information Technologies Fund. Information technology has estimates of $12.7 million in revenue and $12.8 million in the operating budget. 66.3% of that is services and supplies, mainly those contract services. And 33.7% is personnel cost, and then a very small 0.8% of those O&M projects. As projects move out of the development implementation stage, they move on to a maintenance stage, and that is where the increase is for the 6.1% as compared to the current fiscal year. In fleet operations, they have estimates of $5.4 million in revenue and $5.1 million in the operating budget. The 79.1% of the operating budget is for services and supplies, 20.9% is made up of personnel services, and 0.2% is made up of those O&M projects listed at the $10,000 above. There's an increase of 5.6% or $271,000 when compared to the current fiscal year. The increase is primarily related to the fuel budget, and then there's decreases in other areas. Workers' compensation accounts for claims related to work-related injuries and has estimates of $2.6 million in revenue and $3 million in the operating budget. You may notice that expenditures exceed revenues in this fund with the exception of fiscal year 2020. This picture only reflects each individual year's revenue and expenditures, and it doesn't include the fund balance that we maintain for that workers' compensation losses. 53.2% of the operating budget is claims-related expenses, and 23% is insurance premiums. The increase of $63,000 or 2.2% when compared to fiscal year 2023 is mainly for insurance premiums. The liability risk retention account is for claims against the city and are non-work related. These are estimates of $5.7 million in revenue and $4.3 million in the operating budget. 79.7% of the operating budget is insurance premiums. The increase of $1.1 million or 35% as compared to the current fiscal year is for the insurance premiums. And I'm going to throw it back to Kim for the general fund. Yes, sir.
Can you explain on the liability risk retention fund, the differences between 2020 and 2024? Is it an accounting issue? Because it went from 200,000 to 4.3 million.
I think, yeah.
I'd have to look at the detail on it, Dean, unless you know off the top of your head. Otherwise, I'll look at the detail and bring it back to you when we bring the proposed budget.
I don't have the details off the top of my head, but I can tell you a large percentage is likely the insurance premiums, which have skyrocketed, really
Wow.
skyrocketed.
Okay, I just wanted to see, I guess skyrocket is appropriate.
Our actual claims paid has not changed significantly, and in fact has been rather low in the last couple of years. So it's got to be premium. Everything
That's
else is fairly
exponential.
stable.
I mean, yeah, from 200,000 to 4.3 million, that's crazy. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the general fund. So the proposed operating budget is $187.3 million, and again, this is before any service change requests are included or any CIPs. This represents an increase of 5.5% when compared to the adopted budget for fiscal year 23, and about a 4.5% increase when compared to our current fiscal year budget that's been adjusted throughout the year as different items have come to council for approval since the fiscal year began. So this is just a different snapshot of the same information. It kind of slices it in a different way so you can see it by department and then under the different expenditure categories. So you can see that personnel services is our largest portion at 60.1%. Second largest category is materials and supplies. There's a total of $1.1 million included in the general fund for fiscal year '24 for O&M projects, and this includes the ERP system, $50,000 for a building evaluation, and $31,800 for corporation yard facility improvements. And so this is a picture of what the adopted budget was for the current fiscal year as compared to what we're proposing for next fiscal year. And you can see this is the 5.5% increase that I was talking about. Let's see, there's an increase of $9.7 million, and that includes $3.6 million in contractual services and $2.8 million in materials and supplies. So focusing in on those two largest categories that are growing. In contractual services, the increases are primarily due to a full year of funding for the homeless shelter operations and an increase in planning and development contracted services. But in planning and development, there are also temporary decreases in personnel that help us to offset those contracted services to supplement the activities that are occurring in that department. In materials and supplies category, there's an increase in debt service, and this is just based on the payment schedule that we have for the pension obligation bonds. We knew that we would be seeing, it's already built into the payment schedule of increases over the next couple of years to get that paid off. In addition, there's an increase in general government for insurance premiums, and then there's a decrease in fire budget for the one-time items that we funded in fiscal year '23. And then in the other departments, there's some smaller increases and decreases that kind of offset each other. So this is taking a look at the general fund financial forecast for fiscal year '24, as well as 4 additional years beyond that. The item in the red box is for fiscal year '24 specifically, and then the items highlighted in kind of that peach color. This picture does include the CIPs, the O&M projects, and the service change requests. CIPs and service changes will be in presentations later today, but this just gives you a snapshot if we move forward with approving all of those items that are included in those presentations. This is what that picture looks like for you. And this does take into account near the very bottom amounts that we would be looking to put aside in Measure X reserves. We'll go in more detail in that when we do the Measure X presentation at the end of the day. So what's next is bringing forward the fiscal year '24 proposed budget. That would be at the study session in May. And then based on discussion on items that we have today, as well as items at that May 17th meeting, then when we bring the budget forward for council approval and adoption at the June 21st meeting. And that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Okay. Great job, ladies. Thank you very much. Our next topic is going to be the fiscal year capital improvement program. Before we call on our speaker, do we have any questions or comments from the public? Nope. Okay. Excellent. Okay, Kenny Nguyen, Capital Improvement Project Manager. We're ready for you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Kenny Nguyen, the CIP Manager for Public Works. Today, Ms. Donna Finch, the Assistant to the City Manager, and I will tag team on the proposed fiscal year 2024 capital improvement plans. So the ask for today is that the City Council to provide input and feedback on the proposed fiscal year 2024 capital improvement plans. The presentation, we will recap the current fiscal year 2023 CIP, the accomplishment. Then we go detail on the CIP revamp process. Then we will detail the fiscal year 2024 proposed CIP, the approval process, and the next step. So what is a CIP? A lot of people talk about it. It's a capital improvement plans. It's a long-term planning document that include the funding source for long-term infrastructure investment, such as like street, traffic signal, storm drain, water and sewer system, police, fire facility. It's include the large, like project with large dollar amount, like usually over $50,000. And the small project or like purchase usually include in the annual operating budget. So this is a dynamic document that always evolve to meet the need of the community. This also detail the sequence and the timing of the project. And it's also the identify the additional unfunded needs. So we'd like to recap the current fiscal year 2023 and accomplishment. So last June, the City Council adopted the CIP for fiscal year 2023 to add $61 million of new funding for 48 new projects. So in addition to the $261 million of carryover funding, the current fiscal year has over $322 million for 380 projects. So some of the accomplishments that we accomplished so far include complete the construction of the $10 million water pumping station and the blending facility at Mangala Tank. We completely paved 43 miles of street as part of the annual street improvement project. We also repair about 5,000 square feet of sidewalk and curb ramp at 4 different parks. So now I would like to turn over to Ms. Donna Finch to go over the CIP revamp process.
Hello, Council. Good afternoon. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the CIP revamp process that we've had underway for the last few months. This process was identified as one of the strategic actions in our strategic plan under sound infrastructure. And the specific strategy for it was to review and revamp the capital improvement plan program to include all potential capital improvement projects, whether funded or not, utilizing a 10-year time horizon, and then develop a prioritized implementation plan. So in order to accomplish this, we thought it was important to involve and get input from all of the departments that touch the CIP. We didn't want to make any significant changes to the way that we classified a CIP or prioritized projects without getting input from the departments to really understand why they put items into the CIP to begin with. So beginning in September of 2022, the City Manager's Office put together a multi-departmental working group to take a deep dive into the CIP and look at several things that we wanted to accomplish through this process. The multi-departmental working group included members from several departments. We have those listed up here on the slide. And we started with bi-weekly meetings to go through a list of action items that we wanted to accomplish through this process. So here on this slide, we have the 9 action items that we really took a look at through the CIP revamp process. And these items were based on discussions with the departments and research of other agencies' CIPs to determine exactly what we wanted to achieve. And as we go through the slides, I'll discuss these in more detail, but just to do a quick recap of these action items, the first one was to take a closer look at how we classify CIP projects and develop criteria for what should or should not be included in a CIP. We also reviewed and cleaned up the CIP to remove items that no longer fit the revised definition of what we determined a CIP to be, and develop guidelines for how we prioritize and schedule our projects moving forward. We also wanted to make sure that we're capturing the full cost of the project in the CIP document. In the previous version of the CIP, we only captured the budgeted items and the items that were previously spent, but that really left off the table the unfunded portion of projects, and that's important for an advocacy perspective. If we're going out and looking for state or federal dollars, we need to know how much money we still need to be able to complete some of these projects. So that was one thing that we really wanted to include as part of the revamp. We also developed consistent naming and numbering standards for our projects. So no matter which department was submitting the project, we have certain guidelines and standards now for how those projects should be identified in the CIP and how we number those so they're easily identified. And we're also developing consistent language for project descriptions. And one of our longer-term goals that is coming soon is to create a citywide map with locations of all of the projects. So you'll be able to see, eventually, we'll probably be able to get to this and have it fully wrapped up by fiscal year 25 CIP, an interactive map to be able to see where these projects actually lie within the city. And then lastly, we have a process that we are looking to maintain long-term. So we didn't want to just do this for 1 year and then have it be wrapped up. We want to make sure that we're reviewing the CIP with this multi-departmental group on an annual basis to make sure that we're updating and prioritizing these projects annually. So as I mentioned, one of the items that we were hoping to achieve, or that we did achieve through this process, is to develop a revised definition of what a CIP should be, and looking at specific project criteria of what to include within the CIP document. So based off of the discussion and interaction with the working group, we developed a revised definition for a CIP, which is now defined as a long-term investment of funds to improve, repair, replace, or construct an asset, facility, or public infrastructure. Previously, the CIP had been utilized as a budgeting mechanism for capturing not only construction projects, which we always had in there, and those were very important to include, but we also had several multi-year budgetary items that didn't really fit the typical definition of what a CIP should be. So when we went through and developed this revised definition, we took a thorough review of the CIP and removed those items that didn't meet that definition and criteria. And the revised criteria includes now a budget threshold of projects that are greater than $50,000 or greater than, an asset lifespan of 5 or more years. All construction projects continue to remain in the CIP. All major rehabilitation projects continue to remain in the CIP. But one thing that was previously in there that no longer will be are routine maintenance items. So if we're going out and just doing routine maintenance on some of our infrastructure and assets, those are now in the operating and maintenance projects portion of the CIP. They're no longer within the CIP document itself. But major repairs to extend the lifespan of the asset are now defined more as rehabilitation projects, and those continue to remain in the document. We also previously had major equipment purchases within the CIP, so purchases of fire trucks, buses. Those previously were in the document and have also been removed and are now in the operating and maintenance projects portion of the budget and no longer in the CIP. And then development and studies and plans were previously in there and are no longer in the CIP. So based off of this criteria and our review of the program, we were able to remove over 200 projects, 231 to be exact, were taken out of the CIP and moved into the operating and maintenance project portion of the budget. Roughly 30 of those were actual closeouts. So when we went in and reviewed, we realized some of those projects had remained open, but previously should have been closed out because the activities had been winded down. So we were able to do a significant cleanup to go from 380 projects down to 164 projects in fiscal year '24.
I have one
sir.
quick question. So I know we don't have that position filled yet for someone that's going to look at all of our facilities and see what our shortcomings are. Will those be placed in a CIP, or will fall in or out based on whether or not they're maintenance, rehabilitation? Because I see one's in, one's out.
Yeah, absolutely. When the asset management coordinator comes on board and we have an asset management plan, that will help feed into the CIP because we will know all of the things that need to be done and when they need to be done.
So the ones that will be made a CIP will actually have a project. The ones that need to happen at some later point, like eventually we'll have to replace the building or the roof or whatever, but we don't have a date for those. They won't be a CIP. They'll be in.
Yeah, like for example, I think there's a little bit of practicality that goes into this in that one day we'll have to replace City Hall, true. But we're not going to place City Hall replacement into the CIP within a 10-year horizon because it's just so far out. Now, there are other projects that we may not have funding for that if the state or federal government comes along and has a program, we'd like to be ready for those. So those might show up in the CIP in the outer years, even if we don't have a defined date quite yet of when they're going to happen. So there's always a little bit of judgment that goes into it. The point is to be more inclusive of having those projects in there. But for things that are obvious major assets that there's no plan to replace this building anytime in the next several decades, then now it wouldn't probably show up there.
I mean, a facetious example, but I'm just saying I could see something be looked at in both ways. So I'm just curious what the threshold to bounce one from the other. Is it when it becomes real or when there's an actual date? I know that's a weird
I mean,
question.
I'll use the example of using City Hall again, is like, the asset management plan would identify approximately when it needs to be replaced, and we would start looking ahead for in financial terms to prepare for that. When that would show up in the CIP, Donna,
I'd say within the 10-year timeframe, as you mentioned previously. So if the asset management plan identifies that project as being 9 years out, then that's when we would put it in the CIP in year 9 of the CIP, and then it would progressively move forward as we go through each fiscal year.
Thanks.
I think too, once the asset management plan is done, is that $50,000 threshold still going to apply versus capital improvement and just O&M?
yeah, I mean, the same parameters for what goes into the CIP would still apply, yep.
Okay, thank you.
No, that's okay. Okay, so based on the revised criteria and the review and cleanup that was done of the CIP, we regrouped the projects into 4 primary categories. Previously, there were 6. So now we have them grouped based off of project type. So category 1 is facilities, parks, and open spaces. You will see all of those projects under one category. Streets, traffic, and storm drain projects are all under one now. Technology and communications project are the 3rd category, and then all utilities projects. So water, sewer, water reclamation, and electric are all under one category now. And the primary reason of consolidating those from 6 categories down to 4 is really based off of our revised prioritization and scoring guidelines. So one of the things that we wanted to do when we started off on the CIP revamp process is to really develop an objective way of how we review the projects and how we score them and how we prioritize them over the 10-year timeline. And in order to do that, we identified a list of several different criteria that kind of identify what the main function that a project could serve. And based off of that criteria, we assigned a weighted scoring value to each of those criteria. And that scoring value varies based off of the type of project. And that's due to the fact that some projects fulfill some purposes more than other projects fulfill that purpose. An example of that is the first criteria that you see on there, risk to health and safety. So that's a major factor when you're looking at like a utilities project, water line infrastructure, sewer infrastructure. Those are all very high on the list of fulfilling that health and safety requirement. Same with technology projects. If we're looking to improve our cybersecurity, that's a health and safety risk. So that's something that would check high on that specific category. But when you're looking more at like a facilities, parks, and open space project, that isn't high on the list for risk to health and safety. That is more of a quality of life issue. So if you look about halfway down that list, you'll see improved quality of life that ranks higher for that particular value. It has a maximum score of 15 versus for risk to health and safety where it has a maximum score of 5. So at the end of the day, each of these categories carries a total weighted value of 100 points. And when we're proposing these projects and reviewing these projects on an annual basis, we're going to continue to bring this multi-departmental group together to look at each project one by one and go through and say, okay, is this project a risk to health and safety? Does it meet a regulatory or mandated requirement? And go all the way down the list and check the box of yes or no. And then once we're done with that process, we'll have a final score for that project that will help us be able to rank and prioritize where it's going to fall within the CIP. So this slide here shows what the final categories for project scoring will eventually be as we start to move further through the future fiscal years. Currently, we have several projects that are underway already, so we weren't able to really score those and take a look at those and fit those into these categories because we're not going to stop a project that right now might be a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 project. We're continuing to go through those, but as we get into the next fiscal year and the following fiscal year and we close those projects out, we'll be able to take a full look at the CIP and look at those scoring values. So what those values are is if a project scores between 100 or 70 to 100, it will be a Tier 1 project that will fall within years 1 through 3 of the CIP. Projects that score between a 35 and a 69 would be classified as a Tier 2 project that would be programmed within years 4 through 6 of the CIP. And then projects that score between a 0 and a 34 would be a Tier 3 project that would typically land in years 7 through 10 of a CIP.
Ms. Finch, really quick, how do we determine, as new projects come up that maybe score higher, if something continually gets bumped down the list? How are we going to deal with that in the sense of, I know that there's emergencies, and if something happens, it may take precedence over something else, but as things come online and we're looking at funding sources and going after grants, et cetera, is there a fear that something may continually get bumped because it's a lower tier today, and then a higher priority item comes up next year or next 2 years or something like that?
I would answer and say, then it's working properly. If a priority comes up that's more important than that other item, then it should get bumped. And if at any point it's getting bumped too far to the point that we think we have our priorities wrong, then we should have a conversation about that. But as they're reviewed, that could very well happen with a less important project. Is funding is limited and priorities change. If it keeps getting bumped because more urgent and important things come along that score better, then it would continue to get bumped.
Well, if something is currently scored, is there ever going to be a review to go back and say, you know what, let's take a look at this and see if it moves up the list or if it comes off the list altogether? Or
That happens every year.
okay.
Yes, we'll be reviewing them every year. And then I did want to mention that we did build in factors that could move a project from a Tier 3 or a Tier 2 up to a Tier 1. Those factors would include, as you mentioned, if the project is an emergency, so something comes up and we need to do it right away. If there is an immediate funding deadline, so if we received a grant and we have to spend that money within the next year or two or else we're going to lose it, that will bump that project up to the top of the list. If it's time sensitive for any specific reason, maybe there's another external project that needs to occur and this project has to be done prior to that or in coordination with that, then that would bump it up higher on the list, or if the project has a significant community impact. So those are the 4 factors that would move those up immediately to the top of the list.
I was going to answer all that. See, the guy standing on top of the ladder conveniently, that's your number one. If he should fall off, it's on down to 2 and 3.
Yeah, that was my clip art animation. Probably should have looked for a better representation. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to touch on was the items that we were looking at in terms of the document standards. So we did go through and look at the project naming, project numbering, how we describe and justify our projects, and then how we identify the project status. So for the naming of projects, and we're still working on this, you're going to see some names in the CIP as Kenny goes through the fiscal year 24 projects that are still a little clunky. So we're still reviewing and refining those. But ultimately, once we have our adopted CIP, when we come back in June, you will see that all of the project names will be a very brief identification of the actual project improvement that is to occur, the general location or elevation of where the project is located, and the facility name if it has one. We're going to try to use minimal acronyms if possible. So unless it's a very commonly used acronym that you typically would hear for a type of project, we're going to try to avoid those. Or if we do use those, we'll have some type of glossary so you can identify what that project name actually is. For the numbering of projects, the numbering is now going to include an abbreviation of the CIP category, the year the project was initiated, and then the numerical order of the project. So for example, a streets, storm drain, or traffic project would be labeled as ST, which is the acronym for that project category. If it was introduced in 2024, it would have that year, and then it would just go in chronological order for however many projects we have. So 1 all the way through 10, 20, and however many are introduced in that year. And that would just make it easily identifiable when you're looking at the project number. You know, okay, this is a streets project that we introduced it in 2024, and it was the first project in that year that was introduced. For the description and justification, we're looking at now just simple summaries describing the overall project and the need for the project. And then we're also going to have a discussion of the improvements that are planned for that current fiscal year. So some projects are multi-year projects that will just be in the CIP forever. An example of that is our street pavement program. That's just a perpetual project, but each year we have different areas that are programmed to be paved. So we would just identify that within the actual description of the project so you know what exactly is going to be occurring that year. And then for the project status, we're going to have a discussion of what has already occurred and any items that are current or upcoming planned for that project during the current fiscal year. And it will just be a simple milestone status. So we'll say whether the project is in the planning phase, design phase, construction phase, or if we're in the process of wrapping that up with a notice of completion. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. Are there any questions on the CIP revamp before I turn it back to Kenny? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Donna. So now I would like to go over the budget overview and the proposed budget project for the upcoming fiscal year 2024. So currently we have $241 million to carry over from this fiscal year 2023 to next fiscal year. Our department asking about $59.5 million of new funding. So in total, we have about $300 million for 164 projects. That includes 16 new CIP projects. As Ms. Finch detailed during the CIP revamp process, there are about 231 projects have been identified either complete or will be in the annual operating budget. So which funding source is contribute to about the $300 million CIP budget for next fiscal year? As shown here, about 8% or a little bit over $22 million will be from general fund. About a quarter of the budget will be about like $77.5 million will be from special revenue. About a third will be from enterprise for over $100 million. Almost a third of the budget will be also from capital project fund for $97.5 million. And then the remaining 1%, about $2.2 million, is from internal service fund. So how does the fiscal year 2024 allocate the budget based on the new project category that from the CIP revamp? So at about 10% of that will be allocated for facility, park, and open space for $30.5 million. A little bit over half of the budget, $163 million. About $68 million is for the McKinley that will be shown on the later slide for street, traffic, and storm drain. 3%, about $7.5 million, is for technology and communication, and another 1/3, almost $100 million, will be for utility project. So next fiscal year, we were planning for 48 facility, park, and open space projects, including 4 new projects, 5 existing projects that asking for new funding, and 39 carryover projects, meaning the project don't need additional funding to continue to move forward. So I want to highlight the new project, which is highlighted in green in here as the downtown placemaking and wayfinding signage. Dow project requesting for $100,000 for the design budget. The two highlighted in blue are the existing project that asking for additional funding, and then the one in black are the carryover projects. So I'm going to pause after each slide to see if anybody have any comment or feedback. Okay. So continue on. The other new project in this category include PD HVAC system requesting $100,000 for the design. PD locker expansion requesting for $20,000 also for design. And then we also plan to repave and restripe the police training center for about $100,000. So in total, about $3.2 million of additional funding that we are requesting for park, facility, and open space. Want to pause for a second?
Yeah, just number 45, the repave and restripe. Is there at the PD facility? Is there something more than? Because I know it needs to be restriped. I know it needs to be repaved. But is that how big of an area is that? I'm just trying to think. $100,000 seems like a big number.
We're taking a lump of this one, but this is police and fire training facility.
Oh, okay.
And it's the entire gated area behind where the fire tower is. It's been potholed from water damage and run over. So it's basically that whole cul-de-sac to the gate and around the fire tower area.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I was thinking, I've been back there. I know it needs to be redone, but I thought maybe we were building something. But that sounds great. Thank you.
I think you got the short end of the stick on that one, Chief. I think that mostly is a lot of damage because of the fire training.
Oh, we're here for them. Yeah, we're a team.
Okay. So carry on. We plan for 30 street, traffic, and storm drain project, with 3 new projects, 13 existing projects asking for new funding, and 14 carryover projects. So one of the new projects for this category include the Corona Train Line 9A. That's along Magnolia between Kellogg and Fullerton for $3.7 million. That is for both design and construction. Please let me know if you have any feedback or comment on this, the project on there. So the other 2 new projects are the storm drain along South Joy Street for $1.3 million, and then also on South Victoria Avenue for $1.4 million. Both are for design and construction in the circle area. And so in total, $26 million new funding requesting for streets, traffic, and storm drain.
Really quick on the South Joy storm drain. I keep hearing that there's going to be some new facilities, some work being done there at Joy and basically Grand. There's the old Borden facility. There's been a talk of construction there, doing some work there, doing some kind of facility. Is this this storm drain wouldn't have anything to do, like if someone was to build some extensive building there, we would have to do this anyway? Is this it's time for replacement there?
Yeah, this is, we kind of based on the current drainage master plan to identify these hotspots, and then we apply for grant funding. These grant funding are from the Western Riverside, from the Riverside Flood Control. So that is part of basically we identify the drainage master plan for the hotspot first, and then we go apply for funding.
Okay, great, thank you.
It would be independent, yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking if that happened there, if that actually, we've been hearing about a couple different kinds of projects to happen at that site, but I'm thinking there would have to be some major improvements because that building is really old and yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you. So for technology and communication, there will be 18 projects. Currently, there is no new project identified yet, but 2 existing projects are requesting for new funding and 16 carryover projects. There's a minor typo on here. Project number 95 is the existing funding, existing project they're requesting for additional funding. So it should be highlighted in blue, not the 94. So we're gonna fix it after this. But in total, about $750,000 is requesting for technology and communication. For utility, there is a slight typo on here. There are 67 total utility projects. that planned for next fiscal year, including 9 new projects, 17, not 18, existing project requesting for new funding, and 41 carryover project. So the new project in this category include the 1220 Zone Booster Pump Station requesting $200,000 for the design service. As Donna, Ms. Finch pointed out earlier, we're still working on a project title on some of these. So for example, Project 99, that's a water pipe replacement, so we're going to modify that ACP to kind of streamline so that it's easy to understand. Is the water pipe replacement at various locations, or like Project 109 is instead of CIPP, that's a sewer pipe installation project, so we will modify that. So in total, so those $2 million for each for the water and sewer will be for construction for next fiscal year. Please let me know if you have any question or comment on any of these projects.
The cure-in-place sewer pipe installation, is that at various locations or a specific location? Various?
Various locations. The other new utility project include a high-maintenance sewer pipe rehab requesting $200,000 for design. We plan to replace the filter at the Lester Water Treatment Plant for $100,000. Replace the generator at the SDO Water Treatment Plant for $150,000. Replacing the generator at Stagecoach Lift Station for $200,000, and also install the meter at Temesco Valley Water for $150,000. Please let me know if you have any comments or feedback on this. Well, okay. So the last utility project on here is the Well 27 building reconstruction, requesting $80,000 for the design service. So in total, it's slightly over $29 million for the new project and existing project requesting for, existing utility, new and existing utility project. Please let me know if you have any question on this.
The well 27 is just design?
Just design.
Okay. I was saying, that's cheap. We should get them all done for $80,000.
All right, so this is the CIP process. So in February, our department submit the budget and CIP funding to Finance Department. Over the past month of March, our department meeting with the city manager to go over the budget and the funding. So today, right here, there's an anime that Jacob did. Thank you, Ms. Fincher. So today we present the budget overview and proposed budget at the Spring Financial Workshop here today. So we're going to incorporate all the comments and then going to present the CIP to Planning and Park Commission next month before going back to City Council for the Budget Workshop number 2 that toward the end of May. Then return to the City Council for final approval on budget in June before they become official on July 1st. This concludes my presentations. I appreciate any feedback, and then I'm happy to have answer any final question. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you very much. The next topic that we'll be going over is body and in-car cameras. Did any member of the public have any comments? Nope. Okay. Lieutenant Gary Griffiths will be presenting this item.
All right. Good afternoon, Council. Those of you that came to see Lieutenant Fountain, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you'll have to put up with me today for in-car and body cameras for not one presentation, but 2. I do promise that I only have 3 prices for you at the very end, so 3 sets of numbers, and that's it. So right off the bat, the ask is that the City Council provide funding in fiscal year 24 budget for the replacement of body-worn cameras and in-car video with new and improved technology. So a little bit of history. Our current technology began with WatchGuard in-car video, which was cutting edge at the time in 2012. We're one of the first agencies to have in-car cameras. And then we adopted body-worn cameras in 2016. Each officer is currently assigned a body-worn camera, and all of our patrol cars are upfitted with in-car cameras. In-car resolution right now is 720p. We have an on-premise server that the video uploads once the vehicle arrives back at the police station and wirelessly uploads into our on-premise server that we have to maintain, or IT has to maintain. And then our body-worn cameras have to be docked into the station in order to upload those videos onto our server. After a certain amount of time, I think it's about 200 days, it gets uploaded into the cloud with WatchGuard. Our evidence videos are shared through a secure cloud share email through to the DA's office, so that's how we get our evidence to the DA's office for prosecution. So one of the questions is why change now? Our current body-worn cameras and in-car cameras will no longer be supported for repair within the next couple of years. In fact, WatchGuard a couple years ago was bought out by Motorola, and they've been pressuring us to update and redo our systems. They are no longer in production and have been warning us that they are not going to support those cameras in the future. Our current technology is outdated, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Our new technology enables integration with other technology in use by the police department, such as our flock camera systems that I'll speak about, and it eases workload on officers. It also expands transparency with our community by sharing real-time information related to public and officer safety, and again, I'll get into that in just a couple slides. So moving forward, we have an emerging tech committee, all things technology. We formed a committee with staff from various police divisions, including patrol, records, and information technology. We discussed our needs versus our wants, and we met with different vendors to explore their current offerings and just the technology that's available out there. After meeting with several vendors, we reconvened to discuss their capabilities. We are confident if we receive funding, we can have a new system in place by fall of 2023, so pretty quick turnaround. So here's a kind of a comprehensive list of some of the new integration and new technology that's available out there. That's kind of the gold standard for our in-car cameras and body-worn cameras. I'm going to go through each one of these, but it shouldn't take too long. So the first thing is a seamless sharing with the district attorney's office. This is just a more robust automatic sharing with the district attorney's office that they've already are on a comprehensive system countywide, so that they can access our body cameras a lot easier and quicker. All we have to do is check a box, and they would have access to those videos for criminal prosecution. Mobile uploading is via CreditPoint, so basically like a hotspot in the vehicle, so it can immediately upload body-worn cameras and car cameras into the cloud server while the officer's still out in the field. This is important. I know Deputy Isaiah Cordero, who was murdered in Rubidoux, the Riverside County deputy. Riverside Sheriff's has this technology, and they were able to access his body camera. He was the motor officer that was shot on a traffic stop. They were able to access his body camera, upload that video, and distribute that video out to officers via email almost immediately. And then as what happened is an off-duty Beaumont sergeant actually saw the suspect vehicle on the 15 freeway just a short time later, and then they got in that pursuit of that suspect. So they were able to capture that suspect pretty quick. There's auto-triggering available for recording and auto-tagging with our CAD calls. So currently the officers record a video, then they have to let the camera know if it was evidentiary or if it was not evidentiary or if it was related to a homicide or several categories of calls. And then they also have to go in there and manually put in the case number that is associated with that video. As you can imagine, with all the things that we're tasking our officers with, that becomes very burdensome over time, and there's a lot of mistakes that are made. Some of the new companies are able to auto-tag that, so they look at our CAD system, see what call the officer was on at that time, and mirror the time of the video with that call, and then auto-tag it with that case number. So it makes it a lot easier to find in the future. Also, some of the technology has unmanned aircraft system integration, so that it all saves the videos under one database, if you will. License plate reader integration with in-car cameras. I know I mentioned Flock. We utilize Flock. There's companies that use Flock so that the in-car camera is automatically scanning license plates as the officer drives and can alert the officer if there's a wanted person, driving in front of them or around them. There's also GPS locations available for these body-worn cameras, so we know where the actual officer is at all times. Currently, we have GPS in the cars, but if they're away from their vehicle, we wouldn't know where that officer is. There's also auto redaction capabilities. So currently, our staff processes that manually. So they have to, if you imagine if there's a public records request, an officer or a records technician has to go in there and review the video, make sure they blur out confidential information, minors' faces, things like that. There's actually AI integrated stuff that will automatically blur out any computer screens or phone screens as to help assist that process. It makes it a lot faster, about 50% faster. Some companies also offer interview room cameras, which would also be uploaded to the same database, which is just ease of having everything in one spot. There's also auto transcription. So if you do an interview, if a detective does an interview, some of these interviews can last hours. Instead of paying a company to transcribe that interview for court, the video, now the AI is getting a lot better at recognizing voices and can actually split up the transcription for us. It includes unlimited third-party storage. So currently we have a digital on-cue system, it's called, where we upload all of our crime scene photographs, any surveillance video that we get from homeowners, any digital evidence that is housed in that digital on-cue that we pay for. A lot of these body-worn cameras will include that all as like in the video, in the body-worn camera video, as well as digital evidence is all housed in the same place. And then they offer equipment refreshes every 3 to 5 years. So like I said earlier, 2016 is when we got our body-worn cameras. We've had that for now 7 years. That equipment's starting to get old. Moving on to a comparison. This is a lot of the same thing, so I'm not going to go through in depth, but so some of our current equipment as compared to the proposed technology. One of the main differences is now all of the companies that we've talked to, it's a leased model. So it's basically a subscription service that you have to pay for. And so what we're asking for is funding. It would be for fiscal year 1 because we have to make the initial purchases and training our officers in a new system, about $815,000 for fiscal year 24. And then for years 2 through 5, $600,000 annually. And I believe the maximum we go on that is $640,000 annually. And that's for 160 officers to each have their own body camera and 63 vehicles to be upfitted with in-car cameras. And that's it. So our ask is that the City Council provide funding in fiscal year 24 for the replacement of body-worn camera and in-car video with new and improved technology. If you have any questions, I will take that.
Any questions? Go ahead, Wes.
Thank you. When I love all the new technology. All this sounds includes safety, and it lowers officers have to enter all this information in. The lease option is interesting. So I think that always refers me back whenever I hear lease. I always hear, and you can have this. So the new technology possibilities, all the things that were on that slide, are any of those part of this 814,000 or 15,000?
So that is for the top of the line. That is all that is included.
All of that. Okay.
Yes.
So the idea is that they're not going to be upselling us. There isn't anything else to get. This is the
maximum
Okay.
that we would spend in yeah.
perfect. Yeah, that's all I had.
This is really exciting. I really like the idea of, one, taking the administrative stuff that's kind of mundane and routine, not routine, but like just taking that off of the plates of our officers are so busy and they're running long shifts. And then when they're done to have to do this stuff is, and I also love that it will help with like, you know, unwanted, unnecessary errors as well. So I was wondering, are we going to be getting the interview room camera integration as well? Is that going to be part of our package?
You know what? And let me back up. I'm sorry, Mr. Speak. That does not include the actual interview room cameras. That would be separate. So now I'm going to look like a liar up here, I know.
No, that's okay.
But
I
did
was
forget about that
curious because
part.
I was comparing that to the next slide, and I was like, I didn't see that on our
Oh,
list.
you're right. I'm sorry.
So-
So the interview room cameras, currently we use leverage with the city, and so that would be something down the road if we decided to go
Okay.
with that, yes.
And then, are there any security concerns about leasing rather than owning? Like, do we run any risk in doing that? Does anyone else have access to our material?
No, we are the only ones that have access to that material. I mean, the major companies probably at somewhere in their IT department has access to that, but that's just the nature of the beast that we have to deal with. And even the DA's office doesn't have access to our videos unless we give them permission.
Got it. And then it says that it has a 12-hour battery life. I did a couple ride-alongs, and I know that the batteries are one of the biggest issues right now. Remind me how long an average shift is?
Right now, about 12 and a half hours is our normal shift.
So,
I didn't even touch on, which is nice, is the current cameras that we have, the officer has to actually take them off of their body and plug them in the car to charge.
Yeah.
And then we've had incidents where something quick happens and they jump out of the car and they forget their camera.
Yep.
With a lot of the new technology, they have breakaway cords that kind of just plug into the USB while the officer's wearing the camera so they don't forget to take it off.
Oh, that's
And
smart.
if they jump out, it's like a magnet, it'll just
Oh,
come
that's
off.
smart.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, that was it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ask for questions. No, I think this is good. I like the lease aspect part of it because they're going to break, and if it's part of the cost to get them repaired right away, I think that's cool. And just with these cameras in general, I just think they're so important for community trust. I think they're so important to keep our officers safe and protected against falsifications from the public. And I think we need to minimize the amount of errors that can occur. So I am all for the latest and greatest to keep you guys safe and keep the public safe.
I was hoping for the interview room. I kind of lost track after that, but I think these will pay for themselves. And I think you can call mundane work when it's mundane work, and if it frees people up from doing that, that's a big win for the officers.
Thank you.
And I just had a couple questions. You list here the total cost of proposed technology. You list years 2 through 5. After that 5th year, are we going to reevaluate and see? I'm sure that there's going to be something even newer and greater. Is that kind of the thought process here?
Right. So the standard contract that most companies offer is a 5-year contract. And then at the end of 5 years, you could choose to either renew the contract with them or go with a different company and purchase, or lease different equipment.
Mayor, if I can intervene as well on this or interject, the technology now, and to Councilmember Casillas's question, the reason why the batteries no longer last is because they're at 5 to 7 years. So that equipment just doesn't last past that 5 years, and so you'll see in this request and others that we bring to you, it's about
research. I'm assuming that what comes to council is going to be like a single source. You guys have already selected a.
We have not selected a company at this.
Oh,
this point.
excellent.
Yeah,
Okay, so you guys are going to send this out for RFP?
correct.
Okay,
it'll either be an RFP or we will find that there is an agreement already in place. So
okay.
we will use our policy to acquire properly.
Gotcha. I'm sure you will. I guess I agree with everybody. I'm surprised that 11 years and 7 years the technology has lasted as long as it has. And I like the leased option simply because if something breaks, you have 160 sworn, but if there's a unit that's down, I'm sure you guys will have backups, but that return on getting that new unit in is very important. So when we don't own it, we just send it in and they send us a new one type of thing. So that's great. And if there's no other questions, then you are up again
Yes, sir.
for the unmanned aircraft systems. But before you get going, I just wanted to give the public an opportunity if they have any comment. Nope. Okay. It's all you again, sir.
This one, we got a little more razzle dazzle. And I got some help with, from two of my sergeants, so. Unmanned Aircraft Systems, or UAS for short. Oh, they're over here. See, to keep me guessing. So right off the bat, our ask is kind of some direction on one of three options. And I'll get into this a little bit more. This is just so that you have this in your head as we go through the presentation. So option one is kind of status quo, to replace some of our existing unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, as it becomes unsupported by the manufacturer. Again, technology, they stop developing certain drones and stop making batteries for them, simple as that, and we can't get replacement batteries sometimes. Option two is enhancing our current deployments, so replacing our existing UAV equipment as it becomes unsupported, but also purchase additional mid-sized UAV platforms for our pilots to each be issued their own. And then option three is a new deployment concept, which I will spend a significant time today talking about. It's basically everything in option two, plus we would like to pilot a drone as a first responder, or DFR for short, program in one location for proof of concept, with the idea that we would evaluate the program and maybe expand in the future if it's successful. So a little bit about today, we're going to talk about the history of Corona's UAS program, our current equipment, and how we deploy right now. I'll give you a couple of case examples for why this is such a critical piece of equipment that we use. The new technology that's available, the new deployment, like I spoke of, the drone as a first responder, DFR program. And then we'll revisit those options, and then I can answer any questions if you have them. So for the history of the Corona UAS program, I will invite Sergeant Jesse Marquez up to the podium, and he'll give you a quick overview. Right arrow.
Good evening, Council. Like you said, my name is Sergeant Jesse Marquez. I'm one of the sergeants on the UAS team that we'll speak of here in a second. We'll start with a little bit of the history of how the program got started. Back in 2018, the City of Corona Police Department adopted the thought process that we'd be using evolving technology and to better service the citizens of Corona through our police department with keeping officers safe and making them more efficient. So in 2018, the thought process came across that unmanned aerial vehicles, well, also UAS programs, will be brought on to the police department, or at least the thought process of bringing them on. And so the research was done, and in 2019, the program was launched. And when the program was launched in 2019, it consisted of 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, 5 UAS pilots, 1 professional staff, and we'll talk about him in a minute. He's just mainly the guy that handles our programming and makes sure that the aircraft are always ready to fly and ready to deploy. At 2019, we had 1 large format UAV, which we'll talk about in a bit, 3 medium and 2 small. And at the time of the program, the first year it was implemented, we responded to 36 calls for service. It's kind of important to note that at this point and since 2019, the UAS program has been staffed by officers that are a part of a collateral team. And by a collateral team is all these officers have other duties, whether they're assigned to traffic, the Detective Bureau, personnel and training, patrol. They use the UAS as a supplement to their duties. So they're not just strictly UAS pilots. Nobody's getting paid to just fly the drones around. So they're actually deployed in other parts of the department. So, and 2022, we are at 1 lieutenant. So currently we have 1 lieutenant, which you met with Sergeant Griffith back here, 3 sergeants, which is myself, Sergeant Hubbard, and Sergeant Hackett, and 12 officer pilots now that we've upgraded the team up to 12 pilots, and we still have the 1 professional staff. We still have the same large format UAV, 7 medium format UAVs, and 2 small ones. Now you'll notice the calls did go up to 68, not a drastic uptick considering the program's 3 years old, but there's kind of a couple different reasons for that. Some of our pilots, which were maybe distributed across the week, have then now become more consolidated on a single shift. So now we have shifts that potentially are not covered by having pilots there, so where they have the opportunity to use it, we just don't have pilots, unfortunately, staffed at the time. So that's kind of why some of the calls, it should be a little bit more, but as the program gets more on its feet, hopefully we adopt a couple more pilots to be able to spread them back across. So our task remains the same from 2019. It hasn't changed much, to have a program that is versatile, flexible, reliable, safe, and growable. And that's part of why we're here today, is to talk about maintaining our fleet and upgrading some of that. And in order to enhance safety and service of our department, we'd ask for some of the upgraded technology that we're going to talk about here in a second. All right, first we'll talk about our equipment, our current, when I say large UAV format, this is our large UAV format. At the time, right now it's called a Matrice 210. So I know some people are hobbyists and they kind of know what these are. These are our larger commercial grade. This is one of the bigger ones we have. It's deployed in that box right behind it. It's kind of a large, bulky item back there, and we generally carry it around in that truck that sits right behind there. This drone is able to carry two formats, one being the camera and one being the FLIR system, or the FLIR system can also be swapped out for a large spotlight. So being that the weight is considerable on this, it's quite of a bulky piece of equipment, an essential piece of equipment, and generally used for larger pre-planned events in order to get planning for larger scale stuff. It is large, so it's not very practical to deploy on a unit on a daily basis. And time to assemble can sometimes take several minutes, whereas you'll see the smaller ones don't take as long and they're more readily deployable. The flight time on this is usually about 20 minutes, and that can fluctuate based on weather. The fact that it is heavier, it does handle a lot better in like windy situations. However, that wind does alter the time capacity that sometimes it's kept up in the air. So this one right now currently does have the FLIR attached. It's that black camera you see there. That's the FLIR, which is also known as like our night vision. And that will be replaced by the spotlight if we needed to. This is our workhorse here. This is our medium format. When I say the officers are assigned drones and they deploy them in their police cars, that's what this is right here. This drone here folds up pretty small, and it can be put in a small suitcase style box, and it will be staffed in the back of our police cars. And officers can go on scene and probably deploy within 2 to 3 minutes. It'll be up in the air, and they're able to feed back information pretty quickly. Officers take time to program these before they go start their shift so that they're ready to go. Literally, there's 2 power buttons, and within 2 minutes, it's up and going. And this is our small format. We have a couple of these. These are primarily used for indoor tactical situations. As you can imagine, it's a lot safer to send a drone ahead to search a room, or at least try to clear as most of the room as we can prior to sending in even a tactical team or officers into danger. So we could obviously send these in, and they can do a lot of the clearing for us before we make it in there. So these are more used within sometimes our SRT team, or in situations where we need to clear an area prior to sending officers into danger. Kind of the similar what we use with the canines. So these kind of act as the same type of thought process. Some of the types of deployment that we use currently is we've been able to, and we've had a history of working with these, is just sending these out to general foot patrols, perimeters that we have when somebody potentially runs from us. We're able to put these up pretty quick and close off a perimeter to make sure they're staying within the perimeter. So we use them a lot for things like that. If somebody takes off running, tactical operations, like I discussed, somebody on a barricaded subject, a small UAS is ideal for sending it into a residence. And then the outdoor ones, the larger ones that I showed you, are great for overwatch. You'll see in a couple presentations when Sergeant Cumbert comes up to talk about how we were able to give real-time and live feedback to the officers on the ground that they may not see, and they may be 50 feet away from it and they still won't know about it, but we're able to give them that information pretty quickly. Search and rescue operations and missing persons. We've had a good sample of this. Is we had a child with some autism that was attracted to water, bodies of water. So we were able to bring the UAS out and search neighborhoods, and we've concentrated mainly like on pools. And so we were able to hit the pools and make sure that he wasn't attracted to one of those, and unfortunately found his way into one. But good thing we were able to clear those, and it helped out a lot with save time without having to go door to door to make sure that that same situation was handled within minutes instead of having to go door to door. And disaster management, as you can imagine, on fires or natural disasters, we're able to put these up and get a quick overview of what's going on. Crime scene photography, we'll talk about that here in a minute, on how some of these UAS vehicles are able to map out scenes within minutes, which would normally have taken us hours using a system that we currently use in the traffic division. So we'll talk about that here in a bit. And then assisting other departments, we've been able to use it with the homeless team to be able to research some of the river bottoms. We just fly it over instead of being able to go in there on foot. Initially, we were able to kind of scout out where people are at and things like that, so we know what areas to go into, so we're not walking in danger. Just last weekend, we used it for an operation with our Riverside County Sheriff's Department, where they were up in Eagle Valley, where they were up scouting out for people that were illegally shooting and illegally off-roading. So we were able to send the UAS up, and they were able to scout those, which direction they were shooting in, how many shooters there were, what kind of weapons they were using, and then the officers were able to safely make their approach. Obviously, it came out safe, and everybody was able to operate within safe parameters, but with the UAS, they were able to give them the heads up of what they were walking upon. So that helped a little bit. So right here, you can see Officer Montero. He's deploying what I talked about, the small, medium range, or the medium UAS. That suitcase that he has right there, that's about the size that sits in the back of our patrol cars, and he's able to pull it out from there, and he's able to assemble it and have it up in the air within 2 to 3 minutes. He's already, at this point, before his shift started, he's already turned on the UAS, made sure all the updates were in there, all the permits to be able to operate within certain airspaces are already cleared out so that he can put it up within a couple minutes and have it operational. And again, this is partly why we carry these, is that limited space back there, as you saw in that first picture with the large box. It's kind of hard to fit the large UASs into that small space. So these smaller drones, the medium-sized drones, fit a lot better back there. So just so we can talk about a little bit of the manpower operating these things, FAA requires us to have a visual observer at all times when we're operating. So at minimally, just to put these in the air, we got to have 2 operators, and 3 to 4 is usually optimum. Just because, especially when we're operating multiple UAVs like we did this weekend, some are going up while others are coming down. It's great to have a visual operator to be able to kind of play air control, if you will. He's making sure they're not staying at the same elevations and that they're staying clear of each other. And again, the larger one here is used more for pre-planned. This is our watch commander vehicle that we use to deploy from. But as you can see on the TVs there, it's great for the operations. It gives the upper staff more real time to be able to relay that to the teams on the ground and give them the live updated information. The big one, like we said, it does have a limited in the battery life. And again, everything's coming back to batteries here, right? Technology, batteries. These, the longer they're getting, the same thing we're having here is that we're coming on upon where the end of life for these vehicles are coming up, and they're coming to the point where they're no longer replacing batteries. So that's part of why we have to revert to new ones. And these batteries at this point are lasting about 20 minutes of flight. And then we have to land them, in essence, refuel them, pop new batteries back in, and send them back up. As the program continues to get older, we're losing batteries, and the batteries are no longer going to be rechargeable, and we're going to have to, we're getting limited on how many we can put back up in the air. And they usually take about a good hour to recharge. So as one set's recharging, we're putting another set in, and we're just kind of playing that revolving game. So that is my portion of it. Thank you for your time, and I'll hand it over to Sergeant Hubbard.
I'm the only one that noticed the glamour shots of the PD with their drones. Those are nice. Good job, guys.
We got to get them every now and then.
Good afternoon, I'm Sergeant Ryan Hubbard. I was asked to do the case studies on this because prior to be promoted to a sergeant, I was a tactical flight officer in a mutual agreement with the city of Riverside and Corona, so I have a unique perspective of working that job for about 5 years, both in a helicopter and in the UAS. So we're going to cover some successes we've had here and just illustrate the officer safety and the things that these can do for our officers and for the community. So this case here, you're going to see officers responded to a domestic violence case where the suspect was wanted for domestic violence, and he was also wanted for an assault on an officer in the city of Seattle. Officers arrived on scene and he fled through this park. You'll see here he's running. We were following him with the UAS from about 1/8 of a mile away. This was one of the more active suspects I've ever seen, both in air support and in the UAS, and you'll see here momentarily why this is such a critical officer safety and citizen safety tool that we use. So as this is occurring, officers are arriving, SWAT officers are actually arriving on scene, and you'll see shortly here the suspect will jump over the fence, and if you draw your attention to the house left of the pool, there's an open slider, and in that house was a normal family, but they had somebody that was bedridden, an elderly person that was bedridden in the home. You will see the suspect approach the house, attempt to enter the house, and then he changed his mind. Shortly thereafter in the video, you're going to see something that was startling to us, and we were glad we were overhead to protect the citizen and the officers arriving. So that's the resident there. If you're able to see, that the suspect goes out to the front of the yard, and you'll see officers arriving. It's kind of, they're kind of dressed similar. So this is the suspect here checking yards, or checking the doors. All right, so right there, you can see this homeowner has a rifle in his hand, and he's trying to find the suspect who's in the yard to the right. So as the slide continues, you'll see officers arriving, and we were able to avoid a officer-citizen situation to where we encountered a man with a rifle, and then there was a problem. So not only keeping the officer safe, the homeowner safe, but also liability for the city. This is a conclusion. After several yards, you can see here he was able to be taken into custody without incident. And then this is all recorded, like Lieutenant Griffiths mentioned earlier, in a 4K format, which with newer technology will be able to seamlessly upload to some of our body cameras and our evidence systems. This call here that you're going to see, we were on a holiday patrol. We were patrolling around with the drones on the holiday patrol, just trying to suppress crime in some of the busier corridors. And we got a call of a drunk driver. Numerous people were calling about a drunk driver. He was driving on the curb, hitting the curb and sidewalks. So based on our going quickly on scene and seeing and witnessing the actions in real time, we were able to upgrade those units to Code 3 lights and sirens to come and apprehend or stop this person from injuring anybody. So you'll see that here now. So we were at the fire station off Harrison when we were filming this, just for perspective. So based on our observations, we were able to get on the radio and request units in an expedited manner to where he eventually pulled into an alleyway and he was detained without incident. So you can see we had observation on the whole time. He can't say anybody got in, got out, it wasn't him. We were able to do that until officers arrived. On this next case, you will see this was a recent domestic violence situation that involved a gun at a mobile home park. And this is just to illustrate the FLIR capabilities that are in the camera systems. So that's the naked eye version with the camera from the UAS. But in a second here, you're going to see the FLIR capabilities, which is basically a heat detecting system. So it allows us to see in the dark better. In the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the officers in a group in the operation, and there's also some in the upper left-hand corner that you'll see once it flips over to the FLIR screen. So you can see a lot of that stuff from the naked eye was not able to be seen, but you can see there's actually our Bearcat rescue vehicle, some police cars, and then some officers on the upper left-hand corner. So that technology helps us immensely. And then lastly, we were talking earlier about the mundane work that sometimes officers have to do and the things that are tedious and drag on and cost money and take a long time. This is a fatal traffic collision where we have a FARO system, which is a point-by-point similar to that of a surveyor where they walk around and they go to certain points and it captures those dots and then it makes a drawing. So for the investigation, there's now technology that we have and we use on these UASs that can do this. After setup, it flies, you program the coordinates, it flies in about 20 minutes. It does the same work that usually took about 5 hours. So that concludes my portion. If anybody has any questions.
This is the current technology that we have, and is there a piece in here, I don't want to look too far ahead, where the technology gets better?
This is the current technology we have. It is getting better. In the further slides, you'll see it does get better. And these things, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, they're like iPhones. They're cool when they come out, and then 3-4 years goes by, and then they've made them cooler, and they keep getting better and better. So we're always behind it, but right now, some of our stuff is coming to the point of where they're not even going to support it anymore because newer stuff has come out.
Gotcha. Thank you. Question?
This is absolutely amazing. I mean, I can so many ways that this makes your job easier and safer. I mean, and yeah, that's just amazing. Looking forward to. I mean, I kind of see this as the same as the the body-worn cameras almost get into somebody that's going to lease these things, and you just kind of cycle out new ones as they come on. But wow, this is impressive.
This is really neat, and the reason why you saw me kind of goofing off was because that example actually happened in that was like my parents' backyard. The gentleman who was running away in the Rock Vista Park, and I'm glad that was resolved. But I appreciate this technology as well, and I was wondering a couple of things. One is if these cameras on these unmanned drones, if they incorporate AI, kind of how our cameras on your vehicles do, right? Like, or is it based on like how? So if you don't visually see the suspect, will it spot it for you and then move the camera for you?
So currently, no. There is a tracking feature, so if I identify something, car, person, animal, I can draw a box around that on the screen, and then it will track it.
Got it.
The technology on this stuff does progress daily, so we currently don't have that. The closest thing that I can think that you're talking about is there's a system now where you can put in some parameters and it looks for those parameters, such as on ours we have heat. It can look for a certain heat range temperature, but they're coming out with stuff that's going to try to identify colors and shapes and whatnot, but we don't have that yet.
That's really cool. And I was just really impressed by how clear that image is. And I would imagine that because we have this tool now, it also helps afterwards with like evidence and all that. So you showed us how it's used in the field, but can you speak a little bit about how it's used after and like affecting and holding these folks accountable?
Sure. So absolutely. Some of you folks might remember the Costco incident years back. We were asked to map out and photograph that from the inside for that case, which we did successfully, and the DA's office thought that was great. It hadn't been done before. There's other technologies where we had an incident off McKinley, an officer-involved shooting, and we were able to obtain they weren't the best quality photos, but rough photographs of the suspect, so gave them a baseline of what they were looking for. So that helps the investigative side. And then I would imagine it hasn't come to court yet, but that DUI driver, that may be utilized because we book it in as evidence just like we would any other evidence in a case. Okay, Lieutenant Griffiths.
All right. So Mayor Daddario, you asked about some of the new technology coming out. So some of the new large UAV category is what I say is it has more increased flight time. So now instead of like 20 minutes, it's more around 40 minutes. They've enhanced the batteries. More weatherproof. This particular one can fly in a torrential downpour and still operate, even operate where helicopters cannot. Increased portability. So again, those large ones like Sergeant Marquez mentioned, it takes a couple minutes to put together. Some of the large ones now are just fold out, so you're talking seconds as opposed to minutes. Better quality video, even longer zoom, better quality thermal camera. Some of the new ones have a laser rangefinder so that the operator can tell the officers exactly how far away something is. It has automatic obstacle avoidance as well, so on all sides of the UAV, if you try to fly it towards a tree, it'll actually stop and say, basically, are you sure you want to go there? Because you're about to crash. So there's a lot more.
Is there LiDAR on these?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. I mean, the only reason I say LiDAR can see through trees.
Right.
LiDAR?
No.
I mean, we use it for work to map without trees, so just curious.
No. And then also some live audio, so you could speak through the UAV. And then I'll go through these quickly. Medium UAV, same thing. Some increased flight time, compact and portable. We actually have a couple of these newer category medium UAVs, which is some of the video you saw that enhanced video, but we'd like to purchase a couple more. And in the small UAV category, same thing. Improved maneuverability, better 4K camera with image stabilization.
The small UAV categories, do they make any of those with audio capabilities? I mean, it seems like if you're going into like a house or something and the pilot is outside of the house or the officer's outside of the house, that'd be a great opportunity to talk to a bad person and say,
They do. They actually have some that even have window breaking capabilities. We don't have any of that technology right now. And one of the technology challenges, I guess, is flying around and through walls. You start to get some interference with houses, and so the signal becomes weak sometimes. I know, yeah, that we've deployed it a couple times and houses have been successful. But yes, they do have some speaker capabilities. With the current ones I think we have now, and the sergeants will correct me if I'm wrong, it's a recorded, you have to record a pre-recorded transmission, fly it, and then it'll play whatever you pre-recorded. Some of the new technology is live audio, so you could actually speak to that person live. So the new deployment method, kind of the nuts and bolts of this presentation, is the drones as a first responder. So this is kind of a emerging technology. This is, I'm actually pretty excited about this technology in the city of Corona. So what this is, it's kind of a diagram that sort of illustrates drone as a first responder. So what you have there is a piloting command. You see on the left-hand side of the screen. That's somebody that's deployed to a rooftop somewhere, wherever the UAV is housed. So these are usually, a lot of cities have used like fire stations or pre-existing city buildings. So you have a piloting command that's on top of a rooftop waiting with the UAV. Then you have the remote operator who's normally inside of a police station or safely inside of a building somewhere. So you'll see that on the right-hand side of your screen. They sit kind of like at a console with computer screens. Some of them even have like a PlayStation 5 controller that they use or a computer. And they will end up flying that UAV remotely. But I'll get to that in a second. So the UAV's on the rooftop. The piloting command is there. Let's say a call comes into dispatch. It's an emergency call. We want the UAV to get on scene as quickly as possible. That remote operator will recognize that call, radio to the piloting command and say, hey, launch the UAV. That piloting command launches the UAV with a controller, gets it off the ground, and then turns control over to the remote operator, who then uses GPS. He can just punch in an address and say, fly to this address, and the UAV will fly to that address. Meanwhile, the piloting command, the reason why we have to have that person there is they become now the visual observer. So just like Sergeant Marquez mentioned, when we're on the ground, we have to have a minimum of two. We have to have the pilot and the observer. The observer is responsible for just looking at the airspace and making sure there's no airplanes, there's no cranes in the sky that are going to be a hazard to the UAV. And that's required by the FAA. Actually, in talking to a lot of the companies, up until a few months ago, they were saying they were estimating 2 to 3 years before the FAA would approve a deployment like this over a populated area without a visual observer, because they wanted to make sure it's safe to fly over populations. But actually, as of last month, late March, there's an agency in Texas that just got approved to fly these without the piloting command on the rooftop. So they pre-deploy the UAVs, and the remote operator can just launch them on his own and send them. But they have to use some ground-based radar to make sure there's no airplanes in the sky. But this is the first step in maybe eventually getting there. And then, so the piloting command would be strategically located in areas where we think they would be the most useful. Obviously, we use crime statistics and types of calls that UAVs would be most beneficial for to place them there. So this is kind of an example of right now. The city of Chula Vista is one of the cities that utilizes the drone as a first responder, and they get about 5 kilometers of range, like a radius per UAV, before they start losing signal and the UAV has to return home. And so this is an example of the city of Corona with some 5-kilometer circles drawn. The center of each one of those circles is located at a fire station. So on the west side of the city, it's Fire Station 3 on Smith Street or Smith Avenue. And then on the east side is Fire Station 4 off of McKinley and Ranch Vista. And then the south side is the Temescal Public Safety Facility, Fire Station 7. So that would be an example that gets us about 90% of city coverage with just 3 locations on rooftops. So that's where the real benefit of DFR comes in, is when you have multiple locations where that one remote operator can go from a west end of the city and then with a flip of a switch be in the south end of the city on another call, ready to go. Now again, with the flight times, it's with even the new technology is 30, 40 minutes of flight time with those UAVs. Well, some of our calls, if it's a major call, we might be out there for hours. And so that's why we still need that ground team to be able to, that just buys us time to get there with an actual UAV team to be able to deploy and then replace batteries and throw up another UAV so that we can have constant observation on that call. So some of the benefits of DFR, I've already mentioned some of these, is improved response time. Chula Vista is getting to their emergency calls within 2 minutes on average. I think it's a minute 51 seconds from an emergency call being received till they have eyes on with the UAV, and they're able to provide a live feed to officers' cell phones and to commanders' computers, so that we could see within 2 minutes of what we're responding to and kind of get a situational awareness in that sense. It provides quick intelligence to ground units, like I said, gather valuable evidence for prosecution, like Councilmember Casillas mentioned. It's also a force multiplier, so one remote operator can quickly switch between incidents, like I mentioned. They found really one of the biggest benefits is that the UAV operators can handle lower priority calls without ground units. So they're able to cancel ground units on a regular basis, where someone says, hey, there's a suspicious vehicle in my area, I don't know the license plate. We can deploy the UAV, go there and say, oh, he's gone. There's no need to dispatch a unit, so we can free up a ground unit, just as one example.
So is the idea then to have three, I mean, again, going back to this picture of the 5-kilometer circles, the idea would be to have a operator at each one of these facilities for a shift?
Correct.
Okay, great.
And just for clarification on that, Councilmember Speak, we do not have the bandwidth right now. So I don't want to crawl into this program. I believe we can walk into it, but we do need to walk into this before we run, and we need some trial situations to determine the personnel that's going to truly be needed, because we don't have the personnel to run this full time right now at 3 different locations.
And can the visual observer actually observe for that distance? It's 5 kilometers, right? And
Yes.
radius. So, yeah.
Correct. They just have to be able to see the airspace in that area. And in fact, there's some certificate of authorization, some waivers that the FAA will issue to allow us to fly kind of briefly behind buildings and behind trees. So they're allowed to lose sight of that UAV. They just have to be able to visually see the airspace, so that if an airplane enters, they can radio to the remote operator and say land or whatever. And then the last thing on that is just increased officer safety, so it provides situational awareness. And it's also a safer location to fly from, which is a big point. So that with the DFR, you have a remote operator in a police station, and you have the pilot in command who's on a rooftop in a safe location responding to an emergency call. With the current model that we have with patrol, you have to be close to that incident with an officer that's a pilot and an observer, and they're busy dealing with UAV. They also have to be worried about what's going on around them at the same time. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. We did kind of a patrol trial, almost like a pretend drone as a first responder, where we just deployed that truck to fire stations, like one on Harrison, like Sergeant Hubbard mentioned. We only did 3 days just to see how it would work. So 12 hours total of work. We responded to 15 calls for service. We were able to cancel 15 different ground units. So we got on the air and said, hey, you can cancel that other unit, or you can cancel all the units because it's been taken care of or they left. We saved over $900 in staff time, if you don't count the actual UAS employees, which is 6 hours of patrol officer time. We were able to capture 2 felony vandalism suspects at Fairview Park. They were spray painting. One of them took off running. We were able to recover a firearm. They ran into that thick kind of brush down there by Fairview Park, and the UAV was up immediately because they were already pre-deployed as a UAV vehicle. We also were able to deploy it over an armed domestic violence where a guy was shooting a gun in the backyard, and we're able to get eyes onto the suspect and relay that information to the officers so they didn't have to approach. And then that reckless driver that Sergeant Hubbard mentioned. So just some of the equipment that we need is a large UAV. Because of the software that has to get uploaded into it, they just bow themselves the best. It's best practice. The cities that have deployed it use a large UAV for the zoom capabilities and just the capabilities of the UAV. We need rooftop space. We need a high-speed dedicated internet line. As you can imagine, you want that latency between the remote operator and the pilot in command to be as low as possible. We need a computer workstation and our DFR software application. So companies offer software that goes that gets uploaded into the drone that allows us to fly virtually and remotely. And then we just need a remote pilot in command, which is that person on the rooftop, and then a remote operator, which is the individual in the police station. And then obviously we need permission from the FAA. So we'll have to apply for these permits, get permission from the FAA. Many cities, more than a handful of cities have done it now, so it's kind of become more norm. We don't see that. Obviously, the potential concerns with UAVs and drones in general, these were the same that were brought up, I think, in 2019 when we launched the program. Some privacy concerns, right, that's addressed in department policy, which I'll get to in just a second. We're also governed by the Fourth Amendment. So there's a bunch of case law that says what can and cannot be used, what officers can look at. For example, there's a case law that says we can't use thermal imaging cameras without a warrant to detect heat coming from a building to see if they're growing marijuana in there. There was actually a case where they threw that out, said that was a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So that's just one example. And we kind of fall under the helicopter case law guide. And then these drones don't lend themselves for random patrols or for long-term surveillance, just because of the limited flight time. We're not flying around just looking at things. And then for us, we've had no reportable public safety or UAV crashes at all. And this is our current policy governing our UAS system. It's just video should be made during in-flight to and from the deployment location. Every effort should be made to minimize intrusion on people's privacy that are not involved. And then one last thing before we get to the ask is this is eventually some of the future will be fixed wing drones. This allows for a lot longer fly time due to the lift that's created with the forward motion. Some of the drawbacks right now is that it requires a large holding pattern. That forward motion is how it increases its flight time. And so you have to do like a large holding pattern, which increases the risk to aircraft and other things around while it's doing that. Fixed wings are still not as stable as quadcopters. Quadcopters are able to provide a much more stable photo or video right now. And then they're also a higher cost. They're in excess of $100,000 per unit. So it's a much higher cost right now. But eventually they will probably come down and we will be looking at that. So getting back to our options, with some prices on there, our status quo is replacing our existing UAV equipment as it becomes unsupported. That includes 2 medium UAVs and replacing our large UAV, which has been with us since the inception of the program. And then a limited software license for our existing UAVs to be able to track our flight time and pilot flight time and et cetera. Option 2 is to enhance our current deployments. So not have the DFR, but to purchase, it says 5 additional, it's really 3 additional in and above option number 1. So that way, that gives all of our 12 pilots that are deployed on patrol their own mid-sized UAV, much like we assign them all cell phones, body-worn cameras, radios, pepper spray, tasers. They all have their own. It just kind of creates a sense of ownership and increased accountability. And then option 3, which is what we are recommending and asking for here, is a new deployment concept to pilot as a drone as a first responder in one location for proof of concept, and then evaluate the expansion of that program in the future. So if anyone has any questions or comments, I will be happy to address them.
Wes, you want to go first?
Sure. This is the future, obviously. I'm excited to see us move forward in this. I think that's one of the things that helps, the way we use helicopter now and the share that we have from RPD. This kind of takes it to the next level, and that's talking about option 3 and that drone as a first responder. But at the same time, the examples you gave are so clear, and the more folks that we can get to use this in a way that gets help to people faster and protects our officers, that's a no-brainer.
I agree, no-brainer. Keeping you all safe is a great thing. I do have a couple of questions, though. What's the length of the pilot program? Like, how long will we run the pilot program, and then how will we know if it is successful?
That's a good question. So similar to what an air unit does, they stat basically how many ground units they were able to cancel, how many times they were on scene of a call first. We would keep those same statistics and see if that is it's worth our investment in that program. And then right now, I would say a year for that, but maybe shorter if we can revisit this and find additional funding to expand to those other 2 locations. Again, the personnel is just one of the issues, one of the things that holds us back.
Right.
Can I respond to that as well, Councilmember Casillas? I believe we can measure success pretty quickly based on our response times. So I believe the UAS program, and once it's in this DFR concept and we're piloting, we will track, as we always do, and report out quarterly on our response times. We're usually to priority ones under 5 minutes, and if we see that tick down and we can correlate that to a DFR UAS program, I think that will be a sound example of success.
We can see it within almost like a quarter, within the next quarter of implementation, whether or not it's paid off.
I believe if we are actively deploying and we have a scheduled regular deployment, yes, I think that's fair to say.
Well, because it almost feels like we're going to see it succeed because it's going to get to these locations faster than us.
Yeah.
And then the question about staffing, right? So do we have the staff currently in place in order to have this pilot program, or are we also considering hiring more staff in order to just launch the pilot program?
Yes, so part of our budget request for fiscal year -- is to enhance our professional staff, particularly our community service officers. As we talked about in another committee of the whole with the the traffic bureau needing a community service officer. This program, I believe, can be fielded or enhanced by community service officers who during their normal everyday will be handling reports. And when this DFR program is in place, they can be that remote operator or a pilot. They'll be trained the same. They'll have the FAA license. And so I think we can become even more robust through that professional staff and being, relieving our officers from as many officers as pilots.
Yeah, our unsworn staff are really critical, and they've allowed for us to kind of expand our reach and really allow for our officers to be, almost like hyper experts in the field, which then leads to this question: if this is going to be a program mainly staffed by unsworn officers, then do you anticipate that we won't need as many officers? As many police officers, sworn officers in the city?
Yeah, you've reached your limit, Chief. No, I'll answer that question. I don't see a scenario which we will need less sworn officers.
Gotcha.
What this typically does is it allows our sworn officers to do what they're best at. And as we're always trying to do, and this is a mantra that I use, is let our police officers be police officers and
Yeah.
not make them janitors and clerks and
Yep.
and in some cases maybe flying drones. Obviously, there is a very critical role for sworn officers to play in this.
Yeah.
You can't remove them from that equation because of the on-the-ground needs and training, but it will hopefully alleviate the need for more in the future if we are able to augment this with CSOs.
And the value of just being able to have eyes on the ground and being able to communicate that and get that to our officers before they show up to a potentially very difficult situation like that in and of itself is really extremely valuable. So thank you very much. I think my colleague.
Yeah, just one. I think you answered the question, but just these don't have to be sworn officers. In fact, it almost seems like this would be maybe I could think of a dozen veterans MOSs that folks that drive that fly drones as part of their jobs in the military. This would be a great transition, or at least it's easier to find these kind of folks than it would be, or to train these kind of folks than it would be to find officers that would sworn officers.
Yeah, that's correct. There are actually, in part of our research, the team found out that there are private companies that will not necessarily fly officers, typically the ones that are flying. We're trying to incorporate the professional staff into flying as well, but there are private companies who will be your eyes on the top of the building. Problem with that is I think we bring in CSOs or professional staff in. It's also an opportunity for us to attract, recruit, and I don't necessarily think we need a private company to do that when we're trying to build from within.
Thanks, guys, for your presentation. Just wanted to get clarification. So on the mid-size platforms, we would purchase 3 more under option 2 for a total of 8?
So we would replace 2 and then purchase an additional 3, so 5. So basically it's 5.
Okay,
on
and then
option two, if that makes
how do we get to 5? Like what was the criteria for you choosing 5 as a number.
Yeah, that would give all of our officers currently in patrol their own UAV that they can deploy with that's assigned to them, so that
Okay.
it's set up exactly how they want it. They can customize the controls on the controller to how they like it, and they don't have to worry about somebody else touching it in between their shifts.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would think that, this program in general is only going to be as good as the amount of pilots that we have to fly them, and also how quickly they can arrive on scene. So I don't know if you mentioned that they would be deployed in the areas where, it's more likely to need them. But also, would there be one in each zone of the 4 zones?
So it's kind of two different things. The DFR is kind of to supplement our current UAV or UAS program. We wouldn't get rid of officers going on patrol would still, if they are a pilot, would still take a medium format UAV with them, just in case DFR is out of the range of DFR, for example, or something.
Right.
The DFR would always be there, ready to go while we're in service, ready to launch that UAV. If that makes sense.
Thanks for clarifying that for me. Yeah, I think it's a great program. Certainly enhances public safety, keeps our citizens safer, keeps our officers safer, keeps our canine officers safer. And I like the idea that it reduces air support necessary from Riverside too. So thank you.
Can I address that as well? And thank you for bringing that up, because part of our goal in this program is currently we have a contract with the Riverside Police Department, air support. And while that may not ever go away, because there's always a need for that long-term air support, my goal is to have that reduced contract as we build up this program and make it more robust.
Thanks, guys.
That was my question. Because the contract for the helicopter is a lot of money, right?
120.
It's $120,000 per year, yeah.
Yeah, so if you could switch over to drones, and if the industry's heading that way, then you could put, like, some of these drones can stay up for hours, right? And you can just switch back and forth between them.
Yeah, it's labor and it's personnel intensive to do that right now, because the battery only lasts 30 to 40 minutes. So you have to put one up, bring this one down, change the batteries in this one, put this one up, bring this one down. And it takes a lot of people and coordination to kind of do that. Eventually, some of the fixed wings can stay up for over an hour, 2 hours.
What you might see is a different use. A drone will never replace a helicopter, a real helicopter in a pursuit. For instance, the pursuit we just had covered multiple counties. A drone would never be able to respond to that. Maybe not never, but not in today's world, right, that we're living in. Maybe in a couple of years, as these large fixed wing come in, but not in today's standards, not the equipment we have. So for that reason, we do believe that, having that helicopter support is critically important.
I'm a big fan of the system. Is there, just one other question, as drones have become more popular through the United States, is there like a legal backlash, or are there citizens complaining, or is there any of that going on?
I don't believe we've received any complaints about at least in Corona, for our UAVs.
But the industry itself, they're not under attack, or?
No, there's nothing in the California legislation as we speak, knock on wood. There is other technology that is being impacted or addressed, but not through the UAS.
Yeah.
There are policy in place, and we have policy that our public has access to that we've been abiding by, and we've not received a complaint on any of our drone protocols.
Great, because I think these are valuable tools, and I think in 20 years, it's just going to get better and better. That's it.
Okay, I'm also a big fan of officer safety, and anything that we could do to have any type of efficiency gain, that's great. I think that we are all leaning towards the new deployment concept. Yeah, yeah. Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we have come to our break, 3 minutes late. No thanks to the police officers. So we're going to take a 15-minute break, and we will come back, or actually we're going to take a 12-minute break, and we'll come back at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Open up or else I'm knocking down the door. Gonna make you wonder why you never tried before. You strike a match, start the fire, por favor, you can make it. It might get crazy, but just take it by the horns. Make room for everybody tearing up the floor. Yeah, clap your hands, do the dance, make it yours, you can make it. Make it what you want. You can make it. You can make it what you want. Make it what you want. You can make it. You can make it what you want. You can make it. Make it what you want. You can make it. You can make it what you want. You can make it. Make it what you want. You can make it. You can make it what you want. Make it what you want. Go on. Clap your hands, do the dance, make it yours. Yeah, clap your hands, do the dance, make it yours. All right. Yeah, clap your hands, do the dance, make it yours. Yeah, clap your hands, do the dance, make it yours. Make it what you want. You can make it. You can make it what you want. You can make it. Make it what you want. You can make it. You can make it what you want. You can make it. Make it what you want. You can make it. You can make it what you want. You can make it. Make it what you want. You can make it. You can make it what you want. You can make it. Make it what you want. I get my groove and swagger on, blasting out my favorite song. Let my freaky out, let it show. Let it show. Ain't nothing wrong with confident, loving me, I'm feeling it. Let the rhythm move and let go. Just let go. But some days I'm feeling so down and ain't feeling so pretty, yeah. But I go on loving myself, cause I don't need that pity, yeah. Cause I get high and low, yeah, dust it off and shake it off. High and low, yeah, dust it off and shake it off. Don't matter what they say, I'ma do my thing. I'ma do my thing. Just watch me. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. Just watch me. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. Check my nails, they looking fine. Throw my hair back, feeling prime. Look out, baby, I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll. Feel the beat is coming strong. Make me wanna clap along. Feeling good wherever I go. But some days I'm feeling so down and feeling so pretty, yeah. But I go on loving myself, cause I don't need that pity, yeah. Cause I get high and low, yeah, dust it off and shake it off. High and low, yeah, dust it off and shake it off. Don't matter what they say, I'ma do my thing. I'ma do my thing. Just watch me. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. Just watch me. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. High and low, yeah, dust it off and shake it off. High and low, yeah, dust it off and shake it off. Don't matter what they say, I'ma do my thing. I'ma do my thing. Just watch me. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. Just watch me. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. Do your thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. Just watch me. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. I'ma do my thing, yeah. first day on Earth, I fell into your eyes. Look at how our galaxies collide. Every color of the spectrum, every star up in the sky, the planets align for.
Bags for you. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hey, I was eating those chips because.
Okay, so coming back from our break here, we are going to go into street sign replacement program. Did anybody from the public want to make a comment? Nope. Okay. And pitch hitting today is going to be Savat Kampu. Take it away, Savat.
All right. We'll wait till the presentation. There you go. Thank you. Good afternoon to Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council. Eugene Silvas, our street superintendent who was supposed to give this presentation, is actually on vacation this week. So I had the honor to present to you our citywide proactive sign replacement program proposed for the new fiscal year. All right. We hear you. So first, I would like to go over with you the city's current sign replacement program. So the city maintains approximately 30,000 signs that are within the city's public right-of-way. These signs include regulatory signs such as stop signs and speed limit signs, warning signs that are typically yellow in color and sometimes bright green around school areas, and street name signs and guide signs. And in addition, the city also maintains markers and also refreshes and installs curb painting and pavement markings. Currently, the city provides this service on a reactive basis when damaged or faded signs are reported by residents, motorists, or staff through various methods such as see-click fix, telephone calls, or emails. Damaged or missing signs are typically confirmed by staff, materials ordered if not in stock, and then staff ensures that the signs are replaced, meeting size, placement, retroreflectivity, and life expectancy standards per the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. The city currently has a staff of only one street sign maintenance technician and one sign truck with supplies and materials for our current sign replacement program. On an annual basis, the one-person crew replaces approximately 700 signs and installs or refreshes approximately 6,500 feet of curb and pavement markings each year. The newly installed signs would meet updated retroreflectivity requirements per the California Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, with an average service life of 12 to 17 years. And the reason why I'm here before you, because we can do better. Our street maintenance staff is requesting an additional crew consisting of one more street sign maintenance technician equipped with his or her own truck, in addition to the supplies and materials needed for a proactive citywide sign replacement program. Doubling our current resources, staff will be able to develop a geographical grid-type proactive sign replacement program. With the additional resources, we can expect to replace 1,800 signs and refresh 13,000 feet of curb and pavement markings. Most importantly, our signs will be on a 16-year replacement cycle, the life expectancy of a typical sign. We can also opt to be the best by tripling our current resources, adding 2 more staff with each their own vehicle equipped with supplies and materials. We can go above and beyond by refreshing 20,000 feet of curb and pavement markings and replace 2,800 signs annually, resulting in a 10-year replacement cycle of our citywide signs, exceeding current standards and the typical useful life of the sign. The pros and cons of each options are summarized on the screen. We can continue with our current reactive replacement program that consists of a one-person and one-truck crew. There would be no increase to the annual budget, and we would not be as efficient nor improve on the aesthetics of the city's signs. Continuing our current reactive process, our signs would be on a 43-year replacement cycle. However, we can do better. As for the proposed and recommended option, doubling our crew to a team of 2 staff and 2 trucks, the city can implement a proactive sign replacement program that will increase our efficiency and provide the best value for the additional cost requested. The signs would be replaced on a 16-year replacement cycle, maximizing the sign's life expectancy, and we would be in line with the city's strategic goal of sound infrastructure. And as another option, we can even go beyond and be the best, tripling our current resources and going beyond. All right. And in conclusion, staff recommends the better option to begin the city's proactive sign replacement program. And this concludes my presentation, and I am available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can tell you that first picture that you showed is one that I took and sent into C-Click-Fix probably 2 years ago. And those signs are 25 years old. And it's one of those items that I think that this is around the corner from my home, but it's a direct reflection of how the city sees its streets. So seeing signs like this that are so faded you can't read them, it makes it's the old broken window theory. Maybe not quite the same, but I think it gives that feel like the city is doesn't care. So I mean, we've paid attention to our trees, we've paid attention to our parks, and I think it's time that we do this. And I'm definitely for the better. I think if we can replace things in a 15 or 16 year time frame, I think we'll capture all of our issues. Thank you.
I'm on board for better.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this forward, Savat. I've noticed several signs that look just like this in my neighborhood as well. And in my neighborhood, it's generally just one side. I think it's the one that's getting the sun. And the other side looks almost brand new, to be honest with you. But, this, again, it's another public safety issue for our first responders when they're at crunch time trying to get there as fast as they can, and they can't read street signs. So, our first responders, our police and fire, they know our streets pretty well. But, ambulance crews that come from out of the area may not have any idea where they're going. So I definitely support the recommendation.
I also support the recommendation. I was just kind of curious. It's amazing the amount of work that the one person is doing now. I think that is commendable. How many signs in the city do we have?
Approximately 30,000.
Okay. Well, I think that you've got clear direction from us, and you saved us 11 minutes. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have a park ranger update from Tree Warden Cortez. Before he starts his presentation, do we have any comments from the public? Nope. Okay. Mr. Cortez.
Good afternoon. How are you guys? Worn out, I assume. Tired. A little clicker. Oh. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys for letting me come to you before you guys stay and just give you guys a quick update on the Rangers. I know I've given you guys a couple updates. Just wanted to kind of come back and provide you some additional updates with a couple options. So I'll get right into it. So we're asking City Council to review and discuss the next steps for our Park Ranger program. Our current overview of our Ranger program right now consists of our one full-time Park Ranger supervisor. We have one full-time Senior Ranger, one part-time Senior Ranger, and the Senior Ranger covers the weekend, so Friday through Sunday. And we have the 4 part-time Rangers, and they all are on a rotational basis. We have 4 Park Ranger trucks, and our Park Ranger station is located in the Community Services Suite here at City Hall. Right now we have our Ranger schedule. So Rangers work 7 to 8, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Hours and coverage may vary based on seasonal and peak usage, so we do kind of stagger them, obviously in spring, summer, or if we're hosting like one of the leagues is hosting a large tournament, or we know we're gonna have a special event, we do kind of stack up on those times. But we do at least have one Ranger on at all times. And like I said, we do bring in the second ranger during those peak times. They patrol our 38 parks, of our urban parks. They go to the library, kind of help around the outside of the facility. They hit our recreational facilities like the Circle City Center, the VAC, the Senior Center, and they also go to our trailheads. So if someone wanted to contact, darn, I was going to bring it. If you wanted to contact a park ranger, you would call the non-emergency line, and you would be able to get a hold of them that way. They're dispatched out of the dispatch center, and they have radios on them, so they'll know where to go. And it is also a safety measure, so that way our dispatch center knows where our rangers are. So they will check in once they get to that site, also check out once they leave that site, so they know where they are. We also have these little cards that we hand out to our leagues. That way, our leagues, the ones that are, people that are out in the parks are the ones that typically want to get a hold of them after hours if there's rogue use or, somebody's smoking pot or drinking in the parking lot, they want to get a hold of Ranger. Now they have like a little cool little card, it's like a little trifold. They give, hand them out to the coaches, or if they see them out there, they'll give them to them so that way they know how to get a hold of them. And I was going to bring one so I could show you guys, but I left it upstairs. So where will you see our Rangers? You'll see them in the parks. You'll see them at sporting events with our local sports groups. They do visit all the picnic shelter reservations, so they will go and ahead of time and post the sign if there's a reservation. They'll also go once the reservation starts and make sure that everything looks good and is ready for their party. The trash cans are emptied, there's toilet paper in the bathrooms, tables are clean, and just kind of introduce themselves and let them know if they need anything for their event. So they do make a personal touch to all the reservations. They do go up to Skyline and Fresno and our other trailheads to make sure the trash cans are emptied and that doesn't look like anything mischievous is going on. They'll just pass out water, talk to people if there's an issue. You'll see them in our open spaces such as Mountain Gate and Bowie Greenbelt. So those are kind of our passive trails through our parks. Again, they'll be there just making sure everything looks good. Trash cans are empty, dogs are on leashes. They'll be at our special events. So they do help out special events, not just with setup, but also with operations of it and the logistics of it. They're at all our volunteer events. So our tree planting events, our community cleanup events, they're at all those assisting with those events. And we've also partnered with the school district. So they're showing up to job fairs and talking to kids about what Rangers do and how to get involved. So they also have a lot of education duties. So they're, like I said, a lot of it is just very educational and informational. So they're talking to folks on the trailheads, they're talking to parents at the parks, they're talking to the sports groups, children at the playgrounds, handing out, little sticker, little Ranger stickers and stuff. So a lot of it's education and fun. They also do some park maintenance. So they will, like I said, if they see trash cans full, they'll fill the dog bag dispensers. All the nice to haves are out there talking to people. We'll engage with our park visitors. And we, like I said, we do assist at all the special events. And then they also they can enforce, after we've gone through the education portion, we do have the option to enforce. And pretty much where enforcement comes in is if we've talked to, say, a rogue user on the sports fields, like, talk to them once, talk to them twice, talk to them 3 times. At that point, then they're going to go and probably issue a citation to them. They will also issue a citation if they come across and somebody's like just parked in a handicapped spot without a placard, or if they're parked in the red, or if they're like drinking in the park, they're going to issue a citation. And a lot of those calls do come in from our sports groups, so that's where that does come in. And we also have partnered with our school resource officers to just be an extra set of eyes and ears, and they'll assist with the dismissal at the parks, like at Mountain Gate and Lincoln Park when schools are getting out. So Rangers by the numbers. So last year, Rangers responded to 1,300 and almost 1,400 calls last year, included property checks. Some of those were self-initiated and some were also called in. But they responded 1,400 calls. They posted 589 of those picnic shelter reservations. So they visited all those folks that had reserved a picnic shelter. And in the evenings, they're also locking several of our restrooms where we would see high vandalism or graffiti. So what's new for our Rangers for 24? Our education days with Rangers. So we're going to be trying to get out and expand our education even more, especially on the trailheads. We do have our Reading with the Ranger. So they are going to be going to the library and doing kind of like they do with the police officers. They'll be doing a day where they read with the children during summer break. We are going to be partnering with our On the Go, so that way during summer they'll be out in the parks. They're out there a couple times a week doing different craft events or other events with the public. So they'll be joining the On the Go team from the library. We also are going to be jumping into our volunteer-led hikes. So that'll be educational, like flora and fauna, and doing the, iNaturalist. So they'll have like little pamphlets that they can do. They'll have like all the different items that they'll see like up on our trailheads. The type of plants, bugs, the animals and things. There'll be a QR code on there that they can scan, so they have it on their phone as they're going through and see all that stuff. The other thing that's really exciting is I've been fortunate enough to work with Riverside County Parks, and we are putting together a Ranger Academy. So it is an academy that will partner with them, and our rangers and their rangers and other surrounding agencies that they're reaching out to, like City of Riverside, Eastvale, Rancho Cucamonga, and even Orange County Parks, are going to come, and we'll have a 1 week, 7 to 10 days. They'll show up every day, and they will get a crash course on everything from, how to deal with homeless encampments, how to safely, deal with, maybe aggressive animals or aggressive patrons. It's a full crash course. They'll get some education on trail maintenance, chainsaw stuff, everything. And when they're done, they'll get a certificate, and they will all have similar, training and experiences. That way it kind of does do some cross-training, and it allows us to collaborate with our surrounding agencies on what they're seeing. Everybody's kind of dealing with, the homeless or unsheltered folks. So how are we combating that? How can we all kind of be preaching the same message? So that's a really fun program that we're excited to be hopefully launching this fall. We are working on the curriculum right now, but it's a really fun program, and I've been super excited to even be part of it. All right, so now I'm going to give you guys some options on what we could do to continue our program. So option A is to stay as is. We keep the same hours from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's 1 ranger, 2 during peak, and it's a total cost of you can see the cost there of $101,000. So we're basically providing the same service as we are right now. Option B is our recommended, and that'll be to continue the current ranger program. However, the changes is we're getting here an hour earlier and staying an hour later. In the morning, it does allow us to kind of visit some of those parks that, where maybe we have them sheltered. We can get there, check the restrooms, make sure they're clean and, ready to go before people get out there and start doing their morning walks or kids get there on their way to school. And then the evenings, it gives us that extra ability. A lot of the leagues do are staying, they're finishing up about 9 o'clock. So it gives us that flexibility to stay a little bit longer. And it jumps that cost from $101,000 to $115,000 annually. And it allows us to have those 2 rangers during our peak hours. Option C is to completely expand the program. So now we have 2 rangers from 7 to 8 with 3 rangers during peak hours. It does significantly increase the cost to $200,000, but it will allow us to expand our opportunities and grow the program. So with that, I'm available for any questions and any feedback you can give us.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the Ranger program. I think it's great. In fact, it's people have gotten used to see them. And in fact, I get more and more calls. And there was some confusion about how to contact them. People were either doing see-click fix. And I said that's way slower. Don't do that. And then they were like, do I call Parks or do I call the Community Services Department? Do I call? So was able to straighten that out and called the non-emergency number. The peak time. What is the peak time?
So peak times vary. So we're just calling it peak times being maybe on a holiday weekend, or if we know we're hosting maybe we have multiple leagues hosting All-Stars, or ASO is going to be hosting a large tournament. So if we know we're going to have parking implications or something, that's when we're going to kind of ramp those up. So we're looking at our reservations and then basing that as our peak.
Okay. And do the Rangers allocate resources sometimes based on previous calls, kind of like how PD does? If there's a lot of hotspot of a lot of calls in a certain area, do they go back? Just because I literally, it seems like I get the same calls about the rogue use of the tennis courts at Mountain Gate, the dogs not on leashes at Citrus Park and at Mountain Gate and at Santana, And it's, so I keep saying, yep, keep calling, call the non-emergency number, but I want to make sure that that's the right thing to do.
It is, and we do. So as we get those reports, we will we have a hotspot list in their room, and they're keeping that on the shift as the Rangers come in. So like, okay, we'll swing by Citrus and see, from 4 to 6, are there people out there without their dogs on a leash, or are they in Gilbert Basin without a dog on the leash and doing the same thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
I too love the Ranger program. I do wonder though, is there, I can see with the numbers of what they've responded, but do you do like a comprehensive assessment of like if the program's working well and what its benefit? Have we done like a deeper dive analysis on how this program is doing?
So it's still relatively new, so we're just kind of tracking our numbers, and before we fully just expand the program and bite off more than I feel we could do, I've just been tracking the numbers, trying to base it on types of calls, number of calls, our peak hours, kind of getting back to the peak hours. Okay, like how many tournaments are we seeing? How many permits are we getting coming through for tournaments or things like that? So that's kind of how I'm tracking it.
Yeah.
And coming up with our suggestions on how to grow the program.
Yeah. And I bring that up because, I love the idea of, expanding what the Rangers do. But I'm thinking back to how the conversation started about the Park Rangers program and what it was that our residents really wanted to see, right? Which is we want a community that feels safe. We want to feel like our parks and our shared space is clean, welcoming, safe. And we really want our officers to focus on crime and not be park rangers, right? So I don't know if, when, how, but I want us to maintain a real critical eye on the scope of this program and ensure that that our rangers are first and foremost being rangers at our parks. All this stuff is great, and I'm really excited about the Park Ranger Academy. But I want to make sure that our community sees the park rangers, that our community feels their presence and sees them arrive when we call into dispatch. So whenever it is that you do an analysis of the program, I would hope that you would factor in those numbers as well, like a response time as well for them and stuff like that. And then my last question is, are we fully staffed for this program?
So we are right now. So we did have a little lull where we had some folks leave us for other career options, but we just backfilled. Within the last couple weeks.
Wonderful.
So we're back up staffed again, and kind of like a feel good story is, so we did have a similar issue like what you mentioned with ASO, where they were calling for service. It was multiple. It was 2 leagues that were conflicting with field space. They placed a call, and then they called me anyways, the league.
You get no rest,
I know.
Moses. Sorry.
It's fine. And he said, hey, we called the Rangers, do you know if they're on their way? I said, I can check, but yeah, and sure enough, within 10 minutes, they were there and were able to sort out the issue with the 2 groups and, get them where they needed to be, and they were happy with that. And took a couple times because they did come back the following week, but, they were able to work it out, and the Rangers did exactly what they were supposed to do.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear it. Well, thank you. Thank you for your leadership on this, and I'm also in support of the recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's been a whole year now?
Coming up on, I think.
Yeah, have you noticed the Rangers kind of getting in their groove now and know where the tendencies are and understand maybe
and
are more mature and better at their jobs? Have you noticed an improvement?
Definitely, especially since we have the 2 full-time, with our senior ranger and our ranger supervisor, and actually our senior part-time ranger has been with us almost since the beginning too. So he's very seasoned and very comfortable in his duties, knows kind of what a weekend looks like, how to prepare for the weekend, where to send staff. So between having the 2 senior rangers, the part-time, the full-time, and our supervisor, they've really put together a great program, and they know how to approach the weekends and the events. And like I said, even this weekend, they'll be out there with the cleanup event or the tree planting event. But they've also, they have their list for the reservations this weekend, and they know who's going to be doing what. So we're staffed up, and I feel really comfortable with the way the program's been going.
Good. I like option B as well, but I think as we expand and grow responsibly, that option Cs in our future. But have you looked at what are the curfew hours again?
So our parks
10
goes
to-
to 10.
So did you consider at all, instead of going from 6 to 9, with going from 6 to 10 p.m., and maybe the Rangers could help people along as it gets closer to curfew time?
We did, and that's something I'd probably have a conversation with our police on, just from a safety standpoint, like at what point do we feel comfortable having the Rangers still out in the parks?
Yeah, especially by
We're kind of
themselves.
trying to time it like when a lot of our leagues are shutting down. So about 9 o'clock, leagues are starting to wrap up and shut down. So that was kind of how we came up with that 9 o'clock hour. But definitely would love to expand the program, and I'm happy to hear maybe going into different
Yeah.
expanding the program in the future.
Well, and we're concentrating on leagues a lot, which is probably the biggest issue, but, I'm talking just people who shouldn't be at the park.
Yeah.
At night, too, so. But okay, well, thank you, good job, keep up the good
you.
work.
Moses, great presentation. I'm truly just happy to hear that the Ranger program's a success. I don't think any of us knew if it would be or wouldn't be, and you take an optimistic look, and then a year later, you guys are reporting great success. And I'm in favor of option B.
Thank you.
Moses, I've seen the Rangers out and about quite a bit, and just at some different events that I've been at, and it's a great experience to see them there. I actually believe that option C is where we should actually just go, because we're going to end up there anyway. Much like the graffiti removal, you'll be back asking for option C. So I would, if the majority is at option B, that's great, but you heard it here first. I think you'll be here sooner than later for option C. So I think as that program expands and the community gets more comfortable with it and understands the capacity, then, we're doing so much wonderful work in our parks anyway. We're going to see a lot more people in them.
Yeah.
So option B is fine, but, you'll be back in.
I'll see you in fall.
Yeah, you'll be back really quick for option C. So congratulations.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, guys.
And keeping us on track. Fantastic. Okay, moving right along to fiscal year 2024 service change results is going to be Julie Kennicott, and our budget manager. Before she gets started, does anybody from the public have any comments? Nope. Okay. Take it away.
I'm back. Okay, this is a presentation on the service change requests. These are asks from each of the departments in addition to their operating budget that we went over earlier this afternoon. So just to be clear, this is above and beyond what is already included in their budgets, and these are not part of the numbers that you have seen this afternoon, except for that last slide that Kim had presented on the financial forecast. The line item was in there. And then, let's see. The ask for today is that we review the information and discuss and provide direction on moving forward with these items. I'm going to go over the titles and amounts of the asks, but also attached to the presentation in your files over there is the completed list, which includes the descriptions in more depth. And then each of the department directors are here for any in-depth questions that you may have. We have aligned the different requests with the strategic goals set by the city. Under each goal, you will see the title, whether the item is a one-time expense, recurring expense, or a mixture of both. You'll also be able to see where the funding is coming from and the totals. And then again, feel free to jump in at any time with your questions. You don't need to wait for, the end or different sections. The first goal is financial stability. The goal is set to ensure the city has adequate and sustainable financial funding to deliver high-quality service to residents. There are two requests in this category. The first is an increase in conference and training budget for the finance department. This will help keep staff abreast of current and developing issues in the California government space for accounting and purchasing. The second is to replace the current procurement bidding platform. This would help to build or to help streamline some of the purchasing process, standardize bidding forms, and address version control of documents. And so the total for this set of asks is $42,143.
Just a cheeky one. Are we going out to RFP for the procurement bidding of software? All right.
Thumbs up.
Okay, I don't think there's any disagreement with number 1.
All right, moving on. The second strategic goal, which is strong economy. The goal is to expand the local economy by supporting local businesses, providing new opportunities for new businesses, and ensuring there are ample opportunities for job seekers. The 5 items listed here are all directly related to economic development, and the total ask for this set of requests is $321,000. I'm sorry, $321,400.
I probably should have asked this before we started. Real quick, Mr. Ellis, these are all proposals that have gone like before you, right? And then what was that slide that you had mentioned? I think I wasn't here for that portion of the presentation where you said that the budget didn't incorporate this.
In your book, in the expenditures presentation, I believe it's the very last slide before the questions slide. There is a financial forecast slide in there, and there is a line item that shows the total amount of the asks and broken down so that you can see that bottom line number.
So that's tab 8? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had some questions on this one. Appraisal services, is that, I'm guessing that's related to just,
Acquisitions and dispositions.
perfect. I don't have any issues with that. Conference and training, I'm full for that. The real estate advisory service, because especially it's reoccurring, I'm trying to get my head around that one.
That has to do with a lot of the redevelopment activities that we're doing. We want to be able to ensure that we're having some thorough review of different pro formas that come in, that we're evaluating what proposals we're receiving. Take, for example, when we go back out for the 99-cent store, we're going to be putting that up for RFP and getting different bids on that. We'd like to have the assistance of a real estate advisory or redevelopment expert to work with us on those deals to make sure that we are putting them together in a prudent manner.
Okay, and that 100,000 is an estimate, but doesn't mean.
Correct. It really is
Not a
just
contract.
a fund to draw from to pay for those services.
Got it. Love the retail recruitment services. In fact, I'm wondering, is that enough? I've heard from two business owners, one property owner and one business owner, just this week saying how refreshing and that they don't see this in other communities. And one a restaurant that can't find a tenant, and he's saying, I didn't think I was ever going to find one. I've been trying to like just sell the property, and the retail coach folks did a fantastic job. So, yeah, if that's not enough, we put some more there.
If we run out of money, we'll be back.
Perfect.
Or we won't stop doing it in the meantime.
Okay, and then special district consulting. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So as you know, we are working on a business improvement district in the Corona Mall area. So that is part of the funding that we need to in order to pay for the consulting services on our side to form that. Of course, the developer is the one that's actually doing the formation, but we also have a consultant on our end to work through that process.
Okay, I didn't have any other questions. Thank you.
That's what I was going to ask, what that was. I didn't anticipate we needed a consultant for that.
We do. It's probably been 2.5 years since we discussed this. It's just taken longer than we would have liked. Some funding was allocated almost 3 years ago on the other end, and this is our chance to match that, to keep that moving forward.
Okay, that answered all of my questions as well, so I don't see any disagreement with item number 2.
Okay, strategic goal number 3 is sound infrastructure. This is the group of items related to investing in public infrastructure, including parks, buildings, equipment, roads, and technology. For the larger lists from here on out, I'm just going to focus on the highlighted items unless anybody has any specific questions on any other items. These 3 highlighted items might sound familiar from a previous presentation given by Savat. This includes the street maintenance technician position, a new vehicle for that position, and the one-time allocation for the street sign materials. The total for this list is $684,508.
just going to be like a
Jump in.
jump in whenever. Can we talk a little bit about the overtime for Public Works inspection? Are we just understaffed?
Yes, so we have had a difficult time recruiting. We have 7 positions and only 2 are full at this time. So we continue to use consultant services because we do have projects out there that are ongoing and we have to deliver that service when they call for an inspection within 24 hours. You will also have some larger projects that require a specialized person to be out there as well doing an inspection. So the groups that we hire take on those inspections as well. It's not only private development, but it's also CIP projects as well. So we have to be available and on call to do those inspections.
Got it. Is there a plan to, I mean, I know that we've been understaffed in a lot of yeah. Can you
We're
speak to
always
that?
recruiting, we're always hiring, so we will be restaffing, but in the meantime, we want to make sure
This
that
is
we're
what we
providing
anticipate.
service, of course.
Okay.
I think 5 of those positions have been open for more than a year, right?
Do you have any details on the asphalt compactor, or like you thinking a cat, or?
We'll choose a premium brand.
Oh yeah, you don't want to get a junk compactor, like it's an important purchase.
I don't believe it'll be a Kubota, if that's what you're asking.
Go ahead and check it out.
I don't see any disagreement with item number 3 either.
Okay, the next strategic goal is safe community. This is to protect our quality of life by ensuring the community is safe and clean. Here you will see the replacement of the police department's body-worn cameras and in-car video. Again, that recurring cost, the $815,000 is just for the first year, and then the remaining years, the price is reduced. This also includes the extra professional staff to help them with their UAS system. It includes 4 additional community services officers for different divisions. For the fire department, this will add 3 cadets to their team, as well as converting the nurse educator from part-time to full-time.
A couple of questions here. Can we talk a little bit about the overtime and comp time for police and the overtime BDT and UAS?
Absolutely. So the overtime and comp time for the police, the $525,000, our overtime budget has not kept up with the MOU agreements for our labor teams. That has, believe it or not, dramatically, I believe you believe it, has dramatically increased our overtime based on the calculations in the last negotiations. And we do have an abundance of vacancies in dispatch, patrol, as well as injured officers who are not present. All that leads to minimum staffing requirements that have to be filled.
So this is department-wide then?
It is, oh yes.
And then and I don't know if this is with MPD, but nurse educator? What's that position? Sorry.
That is across the hall.
That's fire. So obviously with the majority of our work being EMS, emergency medical services related, that's a position that existed almost a decade ago. It was cut, and it provides significant continuing education, as well as we want to expand the role of the DICO, the Disease and Infection Control Officer that we saw significantly impacted during COVID. We had a single point of failure running the whole city for that component. So it's an industry standard to have nurse educators. We didn't want to go straight to full-time when we put it back on board because we were going to have proof of concept. I could have told you it would have worked, kind of like we do with a lot of things, but it was an incremental growth. And we've already exceeded our available hours with her, so it's just something we need to do.
Do you want me to address the BDT overtime? Yes. So that BDT stands for the business district. So our goal is with this additional $100,000 is to have dedicated patrols, both in the UAS and foot patrol, bike patrol, to our downtown area. Because we do believe that having a dedicated police presence, routine police presence in the downtown corridor will be important for the revitalization projects.
Agreed. Thank you. That's great.
And Chief, really quick on the nurse educator, we've had that for a while?
It was cut post-recession, so we had it
we had it for a long period of time, and it's been gone for over a decade. So we reinstated it with a part-time position last budget year, knowing that we'd eventually get here. We just wanted to validate that we knew what we knew, and that's exactly where we are. So the volume of EMS expansion and evolution from technology and procedures has brought us to this point that it's absolutely necessary. Literally, we're behind the curve on this. They've been in place for, multiple decades in the fire service, and it's just now that we're getting back where we need to get.
So can you explain a little bit more about what that person does? You go back in history, and the city had a nurse in the 1940s, but I imagine they're not doing the same thing, but I'm just curious about what they do.
So there's multiple layers to it, right? So obviously a primary responsibility for us is to coordinate with the local emergency medical service authority. In our case, it's REMSA, Riverside County EMS Authority. That nurse educator provides that conduit for that higher level of learning to promote our education for our paramedics to the standard that we need to meet. So continuing education is a big component of that. We're mandated to have CQI on a measurable part of our caseload that we do right now. We used to contract that out to a third-party vendor. So we got to the point that the volume of work necessary to maintain our equipment, our training of our EMS system necessitated that. So it was really just waiting for the right time to bring that back in-house, which needed to happen a long time ago.
Okay, great, thank you.
I think in the past that nurse educator was a sworn position. Is this one?
No, this isn't. So it actually doesn't meet that criteria under our PERS contract.
Got it.
To be sworn.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we didn't see any disagreement with strategic goal number 4.
We do have a continuation slide on that one. This is the continuation to the first slide. And so the police department is requesting to add a police records supervisor and 1 police records technician to their records division. And for fire, they are requesting some one-time money for tactical response equipment and training for specialty resources. And then again, not highlighted up there, but you saw a presentation on the unmanned aircraft system equipment and software are both broken out up there as recommended. So the request associated with strategic goal number 4 is $5,013,526.
What's the patrol armory reconfiguration?
Yes, thank you. So where all of our rifles or shotguns are kept by our patrol officers, if they're not maintained in the locker, in their individual personalized locker, we have a small, we'll call it an armory. It's a room in the police department where the bags and the rifles and the shotguns are maintained with some extra ammunition for emergency situations as well as extra firearms. So that room we've outgrown it, and we no longer can, basically bags are stacked upon shelves, and it just needs to be reconfigured to fit our current staffing and the equipment that we have.
Got it. Thank you.
Chief Young, real quick, is the tactical response equipment, is that new technology or is it replacing old equipment?
It's both. So basically it pairs the radio capabilities with our new radio systems so that we can maintain that full capacity as far as talking interactively with law enforcement and then other regional partners.
Thanks, Chief.
Moving to strategic goal number 5, sense of place. This is to build community through celebrating our rich heritage, increasing access to recreational and cultural activities, and improving the relationship between the city and residents. The first highlight is for phase 1 of the brand implementation. We have reimagined the city's brand as previously presented. The next step is to implement it. The LED sign replacement at Magnolia and Ontario will improve the quality of visual messaging. For the Community Services Department, they are looking to add to their library staff with 2 librarians, 1 for library services and 1 for literacy and community engagement. They are also asking for an office assistant to provide administrative support, enhance program participant communications, and process weekly membership dues, and a recreation coordinator to support the continued growth of special events. The total ask related to Sense of Place is $1,351,993.
What's a collection headquarters? Collection, it's, do you know what it is?
Yeah, Collection HQ is a program that we use for the library. We got that last year, and it's going to be an ongoing ask for us. It helps us evaluate our print collection, so it overlays with census data. It lets us know what of our print collection is actually responding to the needs of the community. This is the first time that we've done an overall look at the print collection at the library to see if, in fact, the books that we're keeping on the shelves are the books that our community wants. So it takes data that we put in about how often a book is checked out, what that is. It looks at fiction and nonfiction, and making sure that people can see themselves at the library and get books from the library that they want to read. So it helps us keep our collection. It also helps us on the nonfiction side make sure that we are relevant. So we have some nonfiction books in the library right now that are years out of date or would be best served with an annual sort of online manual. And so it helps us cull our collection and make sure our collection is responsive to the community.
It's a
It's software.
It's a software.
Okay. And then what are emergency expenses? So it's like, I don't know, item 6 or 7, I think. 100,000 recurring emergency expenses.
That's going to be a contingency fund for facility maintenance.
For facility.
So for building,
like if something breaks, not emergency, like we need to call 911.
Correct.
No, so we have several times. Every year we budget to the best of our ability for our facilities, and then something breaks that we hadn't anticipated.
Okay.
And so this allows us, instead of having to wait and go through a whole process of bringing that to you before we can fix it, to give us enough money to be able to address those immediately.
Since we had just talked to both of the chiefs, I was thinking like, what kind of emergencies are happening in our libraries? I mean, are you first responders down too? Like, what's going on? Anyway, and then my last question: recreation security guard. Also in that same vein of emergencies, like what's happening and where do we need a security guard?
So we have a security guard that is at the library, and that has been the case for quite some time. And we've actually expanded that contract because we had some folks that were getting into the parking garage where staff were and then trying to sleep there overnight. So we have somebody who comes early in the morning, well before staff are there, and clears the building and clears the front of the building before staff and patrons are there, and then is there to assist our staff. Surprisingly, we get some very unruly patrons in the library, and so sometimes we need just a little bit of extra help before PD can come and assist us.
Yep.
So that security guard is there to help us with that.
That's valuable. Thank you.
Where is the light tower?
Just under library and literacy.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, but where?
It's actually not the light tower. It's not a light tower for the library. It is, our light tower is what we need to have a light tower that is.
Is it a tower of light?
Is a tower of light, and it's a beautiful tower of light. No, it is, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. It's the special events light tower, so it's what we are rolling in when we're doing special events for setups and dismantling so that we have those portable lights instead of renting them.
It's a light tower. Light tower.
Actual light tower.
Light tower.
I feel very enlightened. It's up to you, Tony.
Okay, looks like we got all of our questions answered for number 5.
Thank you, sir. Our last strategic goal is high-performing government. This is to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the city's services to bring government into the 21st century. The agenda management software will improve the agenda process. The AED units are requested due to an assessment conducted that showed 14 units to be over 10 years out of original manufacturer warranty and 2 new units that need to be installed as per the State of California Health and Safety Code compliance. Human Resources has requested a new learning management system to help build a more capable workforce by empowering staff with professional development tools. And just like the last goal, this is the first half, so I will stop here and then we can continue on to the second half and the totals for this goal.
I just had a question about the reoccurring contractual creative services. Can we get that sounds very broad. I'm very.
Oh, good, we got Sean here, he's
there
going
we
to
go.
speak to that.
Good afternoon. So the contractual creative services is to support our creative requests for communications. We currently can't keep up with all the requests we get for creative, for video production, for communications in general. And we are not currently supporting like the police department that much, the fire department, Department of Water and Power. We're really working on sense of place and working with community services a lot, but we're kind of missing on those different departments as well as, I think, council, any things that happen in council and our response to like, all the things that happen in council. So we want to basically cover the gap between all the requests we get for communications, and we can't really do it right now with our internal team. So it is a service so we can outsource creative services for all communications needs.
So can I just chime in on that as well?
Yeah.
So one of the benefits of using the contracted services is that when with this contract, you utilize people that are graphic designers or who are video editors, and they are much more efficient than a sort of jack of all trades. The reason for this, again, and I'm just reiterating what Sean said, is that there is an insatiable demand for more video and more creative content in the city. It's going so well that we are overwhelming the team. We're producing a ton. I'll put our team up against anybody's, but there is just so much demand for that, and no one likes to hear like, no, we're not going to create a video for that, and we're also not going to do a posting, and we're not going to do a new release on it. And so this is a way to, without bringing on more full-time benefited pensionable staff, we are finding what we hope to be a more efficient way of farming out some of that work so that we can get more efficiencies when it comes back to us and try to keep up with the demand that we're getting without saying no.
Okay.
I'm going to add to that too for the branding, because once the branding comes out, we wanted to make sure that everything we put out is on brand. And it would be very hard to manage that with our current team, just with all the communications that go out from like the library or animal services or Department of Water Power. So we want to make sure that everything is unified.
Okay, and then the next one is, even though I am enthralled with what IXTP GAC is, and its removal sounds like it's very expensive, so I'm curious what that is.
Tom, is that yours?
That's me. The GAC, right? So
That's what I was thinking about when you mentioned GAC is Tom.
The IXTP is the ion exchange treatment plant. It's the short version of that because that's a lot to say there. And GAC is granulated activated carbon. So what we're finding with some of the constituents that we are seeing in the water is originally the ion exchange was just that. It was a specialized resin to target a couple of constituents in the water, where GAC can also manage those constituents plus a few of the other ones that we're seeing, TCP 123 and PFAS in particular. And so as water is coming in through that ion exchange treatment plant, we're changing that from specialized resin to granulated activated carbon. There's a change out process and then an ongoing carbon. The cost in and of itself is mainly just the change out. All resin needs to be either recharged or replaced over any period of time. So that would just fall under the regular routine costs going forward.
Okay, great. And then the last one is the learning management system.
Yes, that's
doesn't mean $100,000, but.
That's the learning management system that we are trying to acquire for professional development, specifically non-regulatory compliance. We're just trying to get an actual system that will allow professional development, specifically for courses that an individual might want to take to basically improve their knowledge, skills, and abilities.
So is this actual software, or is it an outside company that administers this, or?
It will be an outside company. It's basically like a LinkedIn or a Skillsoft that has courses, e-courses, career paths that you can develop.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the GAC, but looks like we're good there. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the water truck, we're not gonna buy a wimpy water truck, right?
You want us to buy a strong water truck?
Yeah, like a good water truck. Like there's some pretty.
Tom, it'll be a strong one? Very robust.
Very robust. Yeah.
Not a wimpy one.
It's a full-size water truck, yes.
Okay. Well, there's some pretty substandard construction equipment out there, and just want to make sure we're rolling.
I just had one question about the agenda management software. Does that mean that we'll have a preview of the agenda or an advanced draft copy or?
No.
Well, what is it then?
It's a new agenda management software. It would replace Granicus. So we've had all kinds of problems with it. You might remember that you could get your agenda like 30 times for any agenda that we had. We have remedied that problem, but we are looking for a better system that allows us to be more efficient with how we do it. It's really something that you would replace as a city every 5 to 10 years anyway. It's just up for a renewal now, and we'd like to go with a new system. And it would be bid out through RFP.
Okay.
I don't know if it comes out of that fund or not.
It's paid out of the IT fund is where it's currently paid, but yes, there's an allocation from the franchise fees we get from those, the PEG fees, yes.
You want to go to the second?
Absolutely. So this is the continuation. The last 4 items are a total of 7 new position requests from the Utilities Department. 2 meter service technicians, 1 project coordinator, 2 utility maintenance technicians, and 2 reclassifications from a senior utility service worker to a utility service worker crew leader. The requests associated with high-performing government total $1,970,288.
Do we have a shortage in our utilities department? Or are we not fully staffed then, I'm assuming?
No, we're generally, we always have turnover like everywhere else in the city, but we're still digging our way back out of a deferred maintenance era. And in order to stay on top of those programs, there is more work to be done than we have staff to do the work.
Got it.
So it looks like we're adding, is that 7 new positions?
Yes.
The water, how many meter service technicians do we have now?
Currently, we do not have any meter service technicians. We borrow from the utility maintenance, below-ground maintenance division. We use one of the utility service workers to do some of that work. We currently, and the reason for that is that we hire, meter reading is done through a third-party company, Alexander's Meter Reading. These positions are actually going to be in support of the AMI program. And we're looking to get them on board as the AMI is coming on board, so they're from the ground up and have a great understanding of all of the backhaul infrastructure associated with it, as well as the meters, meter changeouts, and necessary maintenance going forward.
So these technicians will be, they're going to be software, hardware? I mean, are they going to be like changing things, or are they?
Sure, they're going to be doing a lot of troubleshooting. They're going to be primarily hardware out in the field, changing MOUs, direct heads on the meters, those types of things. For example, the individual that does some of that work now that we borrow from the utilities section, maintenance section, just this afternoon, he found a cross connection between reclaimed water. So meter technicians look at everything when they're going out to a site. They're evaluating meters, cross connections, and a variety of other tasks.
Okay, so when we switch out a meter, we have this one person and another group that we borrow to do that. And then, so we're saying, when we do the AMI switch, we're going to need 2 more people.
No, so right now, the intent is that we have one person and he's out there looking for cross connections. He sets new meters for development, he sets new meters for construction. The larger meter replacement program is going to be utilized, we hire that out. That's one of the contracts that we've brought into you in the past. And so these 2 individuals will be looking at the AMI. So they'll be using the direct heads. They're going to be doing some of the work, again, looking for cross connections and those types of things. Basically, a meter box that should not have a meter in it that somebody placed a jumper in. They will go out and do, if we have an error read, for example, on maybe the AMI didn't pick up, or we're getting lack of reads from a specific meter. They will go out and actually do an evaluation. They'll see if something's wrong with the meter. Has the meter been damaged? They'll replace the meter. They'll replace the head. And they'll do some of that troubleshooting along that line. If we have a group of meters, for example, let's say an apartment complex stops reading, they will go out and look at the collector and see if they have some of the information, if they can troubleshoot. And if not, they'll at least be able to call a service technician in to troubleshoot the radio system if that's necessary. The individual who is currently doing that work would just drop back to his regular duties of working on the infrastructure below ground maintenance crew, repairing, replacing water lines, service lines, sewer lines, that activity. So these would be not addition to, it would basically the duties that one person has, along with the increased duties that we expect from the AMI portion of the work.
Okay, would you see, are these positions going to be there just through when AMI gets put in, or are these permanent positions that'll be there?
These would be permanent positions because what happens right now is we also use Alexander's meter reading. So every time that there's a meter that is not reading or we have to go out and get a read, when the customer care department calls up, we'll send somebody out and actually go get a physical read. So these individuals will be a part of that. They'll change out bum meters. The AMI is going to be giving us a lot more information. So as a meter starts turning bum or trending bum, rather than using a contractor like we do now, we'll have these 2 individuals and potentially one more to be able to go out and actually do those types of services.
So the assumption is that the AMI will trigger more of those checks and more of those replacements.
Service requests, correct.
All right,
Yeah.
okay, that
Along with the current work that we're doing now with development and developers and change outs and routine things of that nature, cross connections.
Okay. And then the project coordinator, is that related to that as well?
It's not related directly to that, but we have a lot of utility-related operations and maintenance. They don't qualify necessarily as capital improvement, but they're large enough projects that it requires the use of a coordinator, both on the water and sewer and reclaimed water system. For example, we are working on and have worked on one of our secondary clarifiers at the wastewater treatment plant. This is a process where we have to take the clarifier out of service. It's out of service for a period of weeks. We will sandblast the internal metal of that. We will do an inspection. We will do welds. We will have an inspection of those welds. We will replace all of the rubber wear components, rebalance the structure, service the gearbox, and then put that back into place. There are our staff, our internal maintenance staff, who facilitate those types of projects, but we also use third-party contractors to do specific welding, sandblasting, and those types of things. And that's where the project coordinator would be able to come in and be able to position everybody. And it's really effectiveness of timing, right? We want to be able to get that clarifier down, and we want to be able to get it serviced appropriately and then brought back online so we don't see any impacts to treatment.
Okay. And then the utility maintenance tech and the crew leader, where you're reclassing. So actually, it's not 7 people. It's only 5.
Correct. We're
Okay.
adding 5 positions.
Adding 5
reclassifying
positions,
2.
not 7. Just reclassing the other 2 to have them at a different position. The utility maintenance technicians. What are those folks doing?
So these are the individuals. We have 7 treatment plants. We have wells. We have booster stations. We have lift stations. These are the individuals that go around and service all of those pumps, gearboxes, motors, flight systems. These individuals are out there working on a variety of equipment, centrifuge, the dryer, and we have a lot of equipment. This area hasn't grown very much, and so these two positions, we just added, as you saw in the capital improvement project, we finished the $10 million Mangular booster station. We've had a number of those things come online, and these individuals support that function for all of the above-ground maintenance for the utility.
Okay. All right. So you're saying that those two positions are really needed to take care of this additional new equipment that we have that we didn't have before?
Correct.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, so in summary, this is a summary of the overall asks broken down by each strategic goal, the funding and the total amounts of one-time and recurring expenditures. If all recommended requests are approved, the grand total is $9,383,858.
So, sorry, I don't know what that was. Sorry. It was. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I found that slide. It's actually slide 35 out of our tab number 8. And so, Mr. Alice, when I look at this, it is the service change line, right? And what I'm seeing is giving us a remaining inflows over outflows of our proposed fiscal year 24. I'll wait until you get there. You probably know this. It's $500,000. Is that's like I don't know.
No, I don't think that's a complete picture. I think we could explain that a little better because that also includes a lot of money going into reserves. So we're not cutting it that close that we're just barely balancing our budget. We have, I don't know, is it 11 million going into reserves this year?
And that's a line item on there as well.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Inflows over outflows, 11 million, and then less Measure X reserves, which is 11 million. Okay. All right. So then if we get really close then, or if there's something that doesn't pan out, then are we then taking from the Measure X reserves?
You're saying if our revenues don't come in the way that we
So
project?
if this remaining inflows over outflows, $500,000, if that changes throughout the year and we need to make adjustments, are we going to see the impact on the reserves for Measure X?
So I'm going to have Kim jump in for part of this, but I'll venture the first answer, and that is that typically on any given year we have balance at the end of the year because there are vacancies in staffing positions, there are contracts that don't get let. There is usually several million let over, and so while we might go over in one category, we typically have surplus in another. And so, yeah, it's possible if we went over on all things, we could be dipping into those reserves. That is a possibility. I don't expect that to be the case because of so many different areas where funds aren't spent. We typically balance it with those reserve or with the funds that we have within a given budget. Several staff positions are empty. Some contracts didn't go through. We don't end up dipping into reserves typically.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I'm looking at slide 35.
Kim, now correct what I said.
No, what you said is absolutely right. And what we did show in here is for positions in particular, we showed the full recurring cost, so you're aware of what's being recommended. But there will be a vacancy factor that we have not yet applied to that. So of course, if positions are approved starting July 1, it's time to, it takes time to recruit and things like that. So there will be some savings generated by those being vacant for a while.
It's interesting because from my perspective, I feel like we're usually seeing the other thing, right? Like something is always over budget or extended in time. And so, but in the greater, and you have a better view of the whole picture, it ends up balancing out because of staffing.
Correct. And
Okay.
typically, and on any given year, you're going to have a few $1 million left over that we will then talk about where to allocate that year-end balance that we have in the budget. So you're absolutely correct. In the grand total of things, we typically have more left over.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kennicott. It looks like all the information you have, or that you need, you have. All right, which brings us to our final topic of the day. We're ahead of schedule, so that's good. I'm I've got a baseball game that has already started that I'm missing. Before Ms. Sitton talks about Measure X, do we have any communication from the public? Nope. Okay. Ms. Sitton, it's all yours.
Okay, we're here in the home stretch. So last presentation of the day is proposed Measure X plan. And so the ask today is for the City Council to provide feedback and direction on what we are proposing for next fiscal year for Measure X. So the community priorities that we've identified when we Measure X came into being are these 8 different priorities. And we've broken down the Measure X spending into these categories since we implemented Measure X. And so you'll see these categories throughout the presentation. So for next fiscal year, we're proposing or estimating a total of $44.4 million in Measure X receipts. So what we are proposing is $33.3 million in total one-time and recurring funding. This does include decisions that were previously made, so say positions or other recurring items, those are already folded into this number. Reserves would be about 25% at $11 million, 11.1. And the 2 largest categories you can see where we're spending our funds in Measure X are public safety and parks and recreation. So economic development, about 3.9% of the total Measure X funding goes into this category. Working across the table on the top, there's new funding requests of $146,000, new one-time funding of $275,000, reserves of $1 million, plus some previously approved recurring items totaling about $296,000. So total investment for this next fiscal year is about $1.7 million. Some examples of the new funding requests include retail recruitment services that help to identify development opportunities, retailers and developers, and developer site selection, marketing and branding, some of the real estate advisory services related to the downtown area, and downtown placemaking and wayfinding signage design to enhance the downtown Corona aesthetics. Once design is complete, there will be a future request for installation, and that's slated for the following fiscal year 25. And then $1 million of this would go into reserves to assist with economic development efforts. Any questions on that one? So moving on to public safety, it's about $1.9 million in recurring funding that's new, $3.3 million in one-time funding, about $1 million in reserves, $5.9 million in previously approved items for a total of $12 million investment in public safety area. Some examples of the new staffing include a training sergeant responsible for developing an advanced officer training curriculum to make sure that we ensure officers receive and maintain the highest training standard in the region, 4 community service officers to support traffic, investigations, and patrol, a senior office assistant in the animal control group, and then to support the records division, a police records supervisor and records technician. We also included replacement of police radios, body-worn and in-car cameras, the UAS equipment and software, special response team rifles, the 911 phone system, and some overtime funding. Under fire, we have converting the part-time nurse educator to a full-time position, 3 part-time cadets that support a variety of department needs, some tactical response equipment, including vests and helmets for fire personnel, training for specialty resources, and in addition, some fire station equipment and emergency management training. Under service improvements, we have a total of almost $35,000 in new recurring requests, about $1 million in one-time funding, $4 million in previously approved items for a total of $5 million in this category. Some of the new requests include under staffing, a reclassification of a deputy city attorney position, the ERP system, an office reconfiguration in Public Works to provide additional cubicle space, some executive leadership training, office doors, and LED wall packs, lighting wall packs at the Fleet Building at the Corporation Yard. Under proactive debt retirement, we have $2 million that we're suggesting goes into reserves for this fiscal year. There's about $2.9 million in previously approved items for a total of $4.9 million in this particular category. So the $2.9 million you see in previously approved funding, that's actually the portion that's going towards the pension obligation bonds. and then $2 million for reserves. That's money we're putting aside each fiscal year, and then when we meet with the Pension Stabilization Board at the end of each fiscal year, we come back to council with a recommendation on putting those funds forward to that Pension Stabilization Trust. Under the homelessness category, there aren't any new requests for this new fiscal year 24. You can see there's previously approved items of about $5.7 million. And of course, this is includes the approval of the contract for Mercy House. And so that's why you see there's nothing new that's being added here in this particular category at this moment. Under infrastructure investments, we have $255,000 in new recurring items, about $2.1 million in new one-time, $2 million in reserves, and about $250,000 in previously approved items for a total of $4.7 million. Some examples of the new staffing include the street sign maintenance technician. There's also the street sign materials and the vehicle. And then in addition to that, we have alley improvements planned within the Grand Boulevard Circle, lobby refresh for Planning and Development Department, which would include paint, furniture, wayfinding signage, and other improvements to create a more welcoming environment. Funding also includes an asphalt compactor, sewer line repairs at Fire Station 3 due to damage from tree roots, and building evaluation to create an inventory of building assets and their useful life. Under the Parks and Recreation category, this is about 19.6% of the Measure X funding. We have renew requests totaling $226,000, one-time funding of $1.1 million, and reserves of about $5 million. Previously approved recurring requests total $2.2 million for a total of $8.7 million in this category for fiscal year 24. Some examples of new funding requests include office assistant to administer or for administrative support to assist with the kids club and the sports programs, and a recreation coordinator for special events. There's a ball field finisher turn utility vehicle to maintain city fields, a light tower for special events and projects, and then some conference and training funding as well. Some park improvements in this item are also for shade installation at different park playgrounds to help with both park patrons and equipment, and then some fencing repairs and parking lot stripe and slurry seal at different city parks. And then community building and engagement. This represents about 3.3% of the overall Measure X funding. And we have about $460,000 in new recurring asks, $389,000 in new one-time, and previously approved items of $657,000 for a total of $1.5 million. In this particular category, we have an office assistant to support passport services, a librarian for library services, and another librarian for the literacy and community engagement. The brand implementation funding for the rebranding efforts will include digital assets, materials, and signage. And of course, the community mural project, library books, the Collection HQ software. Also, we have digital outreach to include the contracted creative services for the communication team, the replacement of an LED sign at Magnolia in Ontario, a digital agenda posting board to allow for public meeting agendas to be posted electronically. So now if we're just looking at the revenue anticipated in Measure X only, this is for fiscal year 24, a total of $44.4 million is what's estimated. The funding would be $33.3 million with $11.1 million going into reserves. Let's see. So then taking a look at how that breaks down with recurring, one-time, and reserves, you can see again the $11 million going into reserves. So we would be at 25% of the fiscal year 24 estimates going into reserves, 18.6 at one time, and a total of 56.4 in recurring items.
I don't understand this graphic. I'm sorry. If it's a reserve, how is it a recurring thing?
The reserves are in the yellow. So they'll be set aside in reserves. It's about 25% of the total money that we're expecting to receive.
I see what you're saying.
And so it's set aside, and it's not, and we would need to come back to council in order to tap into those reserves.
I see. So the entire pie is 11 million.
No.
Just the yellow portion is 11 million.
The entire pie is all of Measure X, 44 million.
Yes.
About almost half of that is previously now committed expenses, staffing positions, programs. The new recurring is those new positions we've talked about today or new programs. We've got the one-time cost, that's in red. And then 25% of that overall 44 million, so $11 million, just goes into reserves for this year. Does that help at all?
It does. So then this call-out list making reference to the 11.
So just the call-out, yes. So the call-out list is just the yellow. That's
Got
giving
it.
you a breakdown of within those reserves, what pots are we putting that in?
Yes.
Got it.
Real quick, so kind of along those lines. So we set aside 3 months of operating expenses for the city. So these reserves, are they going on top of that or are they earmarked?
On top.
Okay, so we'll be at like 4 months operating expenses?
Well, these are really put in, the reserves that we're talking about here are really for capital projects for the most part. The other one is an operating reserve that we always keep, and that is always invested money, so we're always earning interest off of those funds. This is really where you're allocating that extra, and these are funds we're using to build up for big capital projects. So it is on top, you could say, but one is a capital, the other one is operating, so they're kind of different.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to, I know that one of the things we were very mindful of when we first started talking about Measure X was that the reoccurring is start creeping. And keeping it to 50% was one of the things that, or less than 50% was one of the things that we talked about. I'm saying that was what we talked about last year. We knew all along it was going to creep. I want us to keep watching that because if the reoccurring creeps up too much more, then we're out of money. So, and I want to make sure that we're keeping a really close eye on that because that was really important to all of us.
It's a great point. We share your concerns. We like the interest in that.
And that was very straightforward. Jim's point, though, about the reserve being earmarked, this call out does kind of seem like they are earmarked. Are they? The
Yes.
11 million?
Yes.
Okay.
So those are the buckets that we're putting it in. Those aren't like statutory reserve funds where you can't move money around, but it's our way of keeping track of the things that we're allocating that for so that we kind of know which checking account we're going to pull it out of. We know that we have a big, for example, park project coming up. So we've earmarked some of those funds in the Parks and Trails Reserve Fund. We also know we have other projects that are coming along, and so we've tried to find a thoughtful way of allocating them into different buckets within the reserve fund.
I think that's great because then what ends up happening if we don't do that, then we're like, oh, we have $11 million to play with. And we don't really, because Measure X, what the public voted on, right, was public safety and capital improvement, projects and really seeing a tangible return for their sales tax incentive. So, which is why we had a long conversation about, these reoccurring costs. I mean, and they're going into public safety, which is what people wanted to see anyway. That being said, the reserve money that's going in, I'm glad that we're calling out what checking account they're going into. And that we have that always kind of available. And I apologize for the confusion, but now I see why I was confused because it looks like a call out for the whole pie, but it's only for that section.
You make a good point. We could clarify that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that one? Okay, so then moving on to the cumulative annual investments, and this is something that came out of last spring financial workshop, a request to see kind of where cumulatively what are we doing with this funding that we're getting from Measure X. So you can see that in the pie chart, those different categories over the 3 years that we've actually been getting Measure X funding. And then if I could direct your attention to the table up on the upper right where it says cumulative reserves, you can see that over then the 3-year time period that we've been receiving Measure X plus with what we estimate for next fiscal year, those are the total reserves that have been accumulated in addition to what we're saying for next fiscal year to go into there. So just like Mr. Ellis was saying, is putting money aside to take care of some of those bigger capital needs that we know that are coming.
Interject real quick. This is really great. Look at this pie. I mean, honestly, it's the stuff that, again, going back to what Measure X was supposed to address, and it's doing it. That's really cool. Thanks.
And so the ask today is that we have the discussion with council to provide feedback and direction on the plan that we have for this next fiscal year. And that concludes my presentation.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the homeless request, which is there's none. And that's, I think we can say that's because we've already put a lot of money towards it, but also because Karen Roper's done such a fantastic job collaborating with the county and state and bringing in grants and partnerships and money that we don't have to. So, and I think, we're getting early indicators of our point in time count that we're definitely going in the right direction. And I think once we announce that, it's a big deal. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sitton. Jacob, do you have any closing remarks?
Oh, we're there.
We are.
I'll be brief. I just want to thank you again for taking the time to sit through all this. I know there's a lot of information that comes forward, but most importantly, speaking on behalf of staff, we are so grateful for the council's support in moving so many great projects together. One of the things that as we go through hiring processes, which I am involved in, one of the reasons we attract talent is because of, and I just had this said to me this past week, they watch our meetings and they are impressed with the collegiality and professionalism that our council displays. And they say, that's a place I want to work. And second to that, oh, great. We're going to have to open up the double doors to get you guys out of here tonight. They did. And second of all is the excitement of the amount of things that we're doing in Corona. And what you've just given us direction on provides the funding for the incredible amount of initiatives, programs, and projects that we are undertaking. And so I just want to say thank you for the support, for allowing us to proceed forward with some really cool things that I think are making Corona an exceptional place. So thank you for your support. And second, thank you to the team that's here today and all the people that aren't actually physically here. A huge amount of work goes into these presentations. And you notice there's very few typos in that because a lot of attention is paid to try to distill all of the things down into something that's digestible in a short period of time. So I just want to give a big shout out to the team for everybody's work that went into this. So thank you.
Can I just say real quick a thank you as well to my colleagues and to our team for the adjustment in the schedule. Really appreciate it.
On top of that, we do apologize that we weren't here for a few hours, but we lost a really good friend and we're very close with the Strack family. And we very much felt like we needed to be at Captain Strack's celebration of life this afternoon. So thank you for allowing us to take off for a little bit.
Oh. So thank you to staff for putting together a great workshop. Thank you for being punctual and on time. We are going to close this thing 15 minutes early. So I'm very excited about that. It's never easy to put all these presentations together, and we heard it a couple of times that there's going to be anticipation of what it was that we were going to ask. And so I really appreciate that because you guys are figuring us out as we're figuring us out. So it really makes the presentation go a lot smoother when you're answering questions that we're going to have. You could never plan for Wes. He's going to have questions regardless. So, but great job to all of the presenters. Great job on all of the presentations. We really appreciate it. And with that, we will adjourn. The next city council meeting is going to be Wednesday, April 19th at 6:30 here in Chambers. Thank you.
Won't you follow the stars? Oh,